Chapter 460. Zhuo Xiaojuo felt terrible on the spot. Obviously, these two old fellows had been following behind the two of them all this time. They had no idea how long they had been following them. However, what was certain was that the two of them did not miss a single word of what they had just said. Everything was clearly heard by the two of them. Zhuo Xiaojuo instantly felt that his prostate was getting out of control. It was about to erupt. He was really scared to the point of pissing his pants. When did these two people follow them? Why didn't they notice? Li Chenglong. Zhuo Xiaojuo gritted his teeth. You tricked me. Li Chenglong wanted to cry but had no tears. I'm suspecting that you tricked me. Why didn't you notice with your sharp spiritual sense? Both of them were grief-stricken. With Wen Xingtian's and Yi Changqing's cultivation, it was too easy for Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong not to notice. Even if they were following them closely behind, they would never notice. But the two of them felt that the sky had turned dark. There was no sun in the dark. Yi Changqing revealed an amiable smile and said, "Just now, the two of you scolded me. I remember it clearly." When Xingtian bared his teeth. Well, this old man is really too sinister. I actually eavesdropped on the students' conversation. Zhuo Xiaojuo's legs trembled. He stammered, "Principal, teacher Wen, this is actually an illusion. It's all a misunderstanding." He, misunderstanding. Yi Changqing walked away with his hands behind his back, leaving behind his laughter. He. Misunderstanding, well, misunderstanding. You have 4 years to explain this misunderstanding to me. When Xingtian walked away with his hands behind his back, leaving behind a string of laughter. He. Misunderstanding, well, misunderstanding. It's been a long time, a long time. Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong were in complete despair. They looked at each other, and from each other's eyes, they could see their own 4 years of dark days. Sigh, it's over, it's completely over. It's over. The commendation ceremony was held as scheduled. For a moment, all the teachers and students in the school focused their attention on the two champions of the freshman trial. Everyone felt a little strange. It was because the two of them looked as if they had lost their parents. They were like walking corpses as they accepted the commendation with lifeless eyes. They were supposed to be elated and high-spirited, but they didn't have the slightest bit of it. They were just like two empty shells. As the reward for being the champion and runner-up, the rewards of pills and whatnot were not deducted at all. Everything that should be given was given. But when it came to the final credit benefits. As the champion, Zhuo Xiaojuo received 22,222 credits, while Li Chenglong received 22,000 credits and Meng Zhongjun received 21,000 credits for third place. The difference was actually so minuscule. This time, they didn't announce the exact number of star beasts they obtained. They only announced the academic credits. Many people who didn't know the truth were secretly discussing it. In this year's competition, the top 10 were almost evenly matched. Although the results of the top 3 were far better than their peers, it wasn't too outrageous. The headmaster personally presided over the ceremony. After that, he congratulated the top 10 students, especially the top 3, and gave out credits to all the freshmen. And the class with the most outstanding performance this time was Class 1. Out of the 36 people, 26 had entered the top 30. Of course, if the top 36 were to be ranked, 32 people from Class 1 had entered the top 30. Xiong Bing and Xiong Chong, who withdrew midway, fell below the 90s. Everyone was jubilant. Then, everyone had the same doubts. What was wrong with the champion and runner-up today? Why didn't they have the high-spirited spirit that the champion and runner-up should have? They were like two withered radishes. Or rather, they were like frightened quails. When they received the award, they smiled at the principal in a flattering manner and wagged their tails to please him. They were simply flattering and annoying. The ceremony ended. The storm that Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong expected did not come. It was as if all the karma had been cleared. The two of them held the award and scratched their heads. They felt that their brains were not enough. It's over just like that. Zhuo Xiaojuo was confused. Yeah, it's over just like that. Li Chenglong also felt incredulous. He couldn't understand. They had clearly raised the big board. Why did it not fall when it was waved at them? Swollen, something's not right. Zhuo Xiaojuo pondered. I keep feeling that we've been cheated. Li Chenglong blinked his eyes. I have a similar feeling too. The two of them stood still and stared at each other for a long time. Finally, we must have been cheated. Zhuo Xiaojuo paced around for a long time and finally gritted his teeth and cursed, these two old foxes. They're just toying with us. What do you mean? It must be because of the credits. Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed. It's not a big deal for us to drink a few mouthfuls of the nutrient solution. It's fine if we're found out. There's no written rule that prohibits us from drinking the nutrient solution. If we're found out, at most we'll be warned not to drink it in the future. But credits, we shouldn't have gotten so few. And you shouldn't have gotten so few credits either. You definitely have more than 100,000 credits. My star beasts should have gotten more than 400,000 credits to be reasonable. These old foxes are obviously afraid that we won't work hard to cultivate or participate in the trial with so many credits. They deliberately used the nutrient solution to suppress us. Then we accepted the award and this matter was over. Because we didn't shout it out on the spot, we'll definitely suffer in silence. Damn, in order to suppress us, even Meng Zhangjuan's credits were cheated. Zhuo Xiaojuo instantly understood the whole story. He stomped his feet and sighed. Cheating, really cheating. They cheated me of 400,000 credits without even blinking an eye. And they scared me so much that I became a coward for a whole day. Even after 400,000 credits were deducted, I still had to flatter them. Zhuo Xiaojuo was speechless. I'm convinced. I'm really convinced. I'm self-proclaimed to be an old silver coin who's good at accumulating money, but I didn't even realize that I was being played in the palm of their hand. Li Chenglong was still somewhat puzzled. I still only understand half of it. Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed. With your IQ, it's good enough that you can understand half of it. As for the rest, you can slowly figure it out by yourself. Sigh. There's still a long way to go. The two of them sighed along the way and left. In the distance behind them, Yi Changqing and Wen Xingtian looked at each other and smiled. I didn't expect that we could only scare him for less than half a day. Wen Xingtian looked regretful. Obviously, he still wanted to continue. Just now, when these two fellows were trembling in fear and trepidation, they were simply too adorable. Especially when they were looking at him with a fawning expression, Wen Xingtian only felt that he had reached the heavens. He did not expect that he would wake up so quickly. You should be content. Yi Changqing also smiled very comfortably, and said, they didn't suffer any losses, so they naturally understand. They obviously lost so many credits. Wen Xingtian only said half of it before he came to his senses. Indeed, they didn't lose anything. I was wrong. Yi Changqing laughed. It was wrong to say that they didn't lose anything. Zhuo Xiaojuo lost hundreds of thousands of credits. But it was true that hundreds of thousands of credits might not be of much use to Zhuo Xiaojuo, because 20,000 credits were enough for him to use for quite a while. Based on Zhuo Xiaojuo's performance, there would be a lot of missions and a lot of credits in the future. Nothing would be delayed. If he only focused on the huge amount of credits this time, he might slack off. It was just that he didn't know whether Principal Yi's thoughts were well-intentioned or something else. For example, that so-called acting and establishing thing was not very suitable either. After the award ceremony, none of the students in Class 1 dared to talk to Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong. First of all, these two people were now surrounded by negative emotions. It was common knowledge that if they went up to talk to them, they would probably be scolded. If they were angered, it would be asking for trouble. Second of all, during this period of time, the students divided into groups to find trouble, tormenting each other until they were exhausted. Now, they would sleep with one eye open, fearing that they would be attacked at any time. What's more, there were already people carrying a big basin of male students' underwear and smelly socks to occupy a spot by the pool. It was very sad and embarrassing. But if you agree to bet, you have to admit defeat. You have to admit that you are not as good as others. It was almost lunchtime, and there was only a little time left. Everyone was discussing martial arts theories, exchanging what they didn't understand, what they weren't good at, what they hadn't figured out or even mastered. Anyway, this little time was definitely not enough for sparring. I was attacked 3 times last night. Damn, it's too cruel. I was completely frightened. If there was any movement, I would immediately get up and look around in panic. Don't mention it. It was not easy for me to calm down in the latter half of the night. Hao Han on the upper bunk let out a fart and woke me up. I couldn't sleep for a long time. Fuck. Be content. You were woken up because there was movement. But what about me? Everyone is breathing softly in their sleep, but to me, it sounds like someone is lying in ambush behind me, ready to attack me. Being paranoid isn't enough to describe it. This is very sad. I talked to my elder brother at the front line of the Sun-Moon Pass about this. He said that our level is far from enough. At the very least, we have to use weapons to stab people several times to pass the first level. Brilliant idea. Just as everyone was discussing, someone suddenly commented. And this comment came from behind, not from the people who participated in the discussion. Everyone turned their heads to look, and their faces immediately turned pale. The one who spoke was Wen Xingtian, and he had a pensive look on his face. That's right. If the knife doesn't stab the flesh, you won't experience the feeling of death. He muttered to himself, and frowned as he pondered. Meng Zhongjun, Hao Han, Pai Yi Bao, and the others who were discussing looked at each other, and everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. Then, 4 or 5 people broke down, grabbed Hao Han, and beat him up. What the fuck are you talking about? This is great. It's even worse. We have to start using the knife. Chapter 461. Meng Zhongjun and the others were really on the verge of breaking down. Whenever they thought about it, they would feel as if a cold knife had pierced their flesh while they were sleeping in their warm beds. They did not have to experience it personally. Just thinking about it made them shiver and shudder. It felt so good. Hao Han was dumbfounded. When did Teacher Wen come? What did I say just now? It's over. You'll be taught a lesson by the whole class. Stupid. Meng Zhongjun kicked Hao Han's butt. I'll definitely beat you into a man. Wen Xingtian walked dozens of meters and saw Zhuo Xiaojuo walking toward him. Teacher Wen, I've thought about it for a long time. I still want to apologize to you. I was wrong. Zhuo Xiaojuo looked pitiful. Phut, ha ha ha. This sentence was heard by many students. They could not help but laugh out loud. Then, they covered their mouths, turned around, and ran away. Wen Xingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wasn't it already over? You're not afraid anymore. Why did you still do this? It's okay. It's good that you know you were wrong. I still want to apologize to you, Zhuo Xiaojuo said. No need. I have to apologize to you. Zhuo Xiaojuo's eyebrows moved, but his voice was very hurried. It was as if he was afraid that the head teacher would not accept his apology. No. Wen Xingtian was about to say no, but he saw Zhuo Xiaojuo's eyes at a glance. He quickly changed his words. I have to say, your mistake this time is really quite serious. How could you? I was wrong. Zhuo Xiaojuo lowered his head and followed Wen Xingtian step by step. I'm telling you, such a bad thing has not happened in Hidden Dragon High School for many years. Sigh, you child. Yes. Teacher Wen, you see. Their voices gradually faded as they walked toward Wen Xingtian's office. In Wen Xingtian's office. What is it? Wen Xingtian asked via voice transmission. Teacher Wen, please forgive me this once. I will write a self-reflection for you. Zhuo Xiaojuo pulled a long face and sounded like he was about to cry. He grabbed a piece of paper from the table and a pen and wrote on it, Vice Principal Xiong is plagued by bad luck. His head is shrouded in darkness. He should die tonight. If you want to write a reflection, then write it properly. Wen Xingtian said sternly, after you finish writing, remember to read it in class tomorrow morning. Then, he transmitted his voice, write down the details of the situation clearly. It should be an external force. It's hard to defend yourself. Villains are causing mischief and setting up a trap to frame you. Wen Xingtian frowned. So fast. We must have a way to deal with it. Otherwise, With Vice President Xiong's temperament, it is very likely that the situation will develop into an irreparable situation. You can do this and this and this and this. Zhuo Xiaojuo wrote. What else? Wen Xingtian asked. I've finished. That's all. Zhuo Xiaojuo looked obedient. Wen Xingtian flew into a rage. He grabbed the self-reflection and smashed it into pieces. He said furiously, What are you writing? Is this the attitude of an apology? Go home and rewrite it. If you can't do it tomorrow, continue to rewrite until I'm satisfied. With a loud bang, Zhuo Xiaojuo was sent flying by Wen Xingtian's kick. He rolled twice on the ground and scrambled to escape. Wen Xingtian stood at the door, his anger still lingering. Minister Wen, it's rare to see you so angry. Vice President Wu walked over from the office next door and said with a smile. This little naughty monkey is really. Wen Xingtian was panting with anger. He suddenly realized and said lightly, Vice President Wu, why are you so free today to chat with me? Ha. I don't have time to chat. He turned around and walked away, leaving behind a sentence, if I don't teach students for a day, my salary will be gone. I'm not like some leaders who don't teach classes every day. Just by being a principal, they can get a high salary and bonus. They can get a promotion just by dropping their buttocks. Hee. Wen Xingtian left without any politeness. Vice President Wu just looked at Wen Xingtian's figure fading away. His face was still calm, but deep in his eyes, there was a coldness like that of a poisonous snake. Wen Xingtian was also a nail that must be removed. The afternoon classes were very peaceful. Only Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong received special treatment from Wen Xingtian. They were beaten to the point that they could not take care of themselves. Finally, after school, Zhuo Xiaojuo held his butt that was almost beaten into 36 pieces, and Li Chenglong held his face that was as swollen as a washbasin. They went home in a sorry state. The nourishment chamber of Hidden Dragon High School was not open to these two guys. Fortunately, the time limit was only 1 week, and what made Zhuo Xiaojuo feel the most relieved was that the Annihilation Tower was back. If he was beaten, then so be it. He was already used to being beaten by the teacher. Previously, it was Qin Fangyang, now it was Wen Xingtian. The difference was that Wen Xingtian's net worth was much more than Qin Fangyang's. According to his own information, it was quite terrifying. He welcomed the challenge. If the challenge was successful, he could take it all away, although Wen Xingtian's strength was a little high. Yes, it was a little high, but people always had some ideas. What if he succeeded? Master Zhuo's recent goal was to defeat Qin Fangyang and defeat Wen Xingtian. He would repeat this sentence several times every night. Every time, he would imagine himself beating Qin Fangyang to the ground and then laughing to the sky. Teacher Qin, ha, you didn't expect this day, right? Oh ho. Or he would beat Wen Xingtian to the ground, put his hands on his waist and shake his head. Teacher Wen, how does it feel to be defeated by your own student? Ha. Every time he thought of these two scenes, Zhuo Xiaojuo's blood would boil and his whole body would be full of energy. Of course, there was also the last great goal. The scene was, he would grab Yi Chongqing's hair and lift him up from the ground, asking fiercely, old thing, when you deducted 400,000 credits from me, you didn't expect this day, did you? Oh ho. Zhuo Xiaojuo squinted his eyes and sat on the sofa with a sinister smile on the corner of his mouth. His eyes were constantly changing as he laughed, and his shoulders were shaking with arrogance. Oh hey! He was addicted to the illusion and couldn't extricate himself. Li Chenglong shivered all over. He tiptoed back to his room and locked the door. Zhuo had gone crazy. I have to hide far away. The students had all left. Xiong Quangren also strode out of the office and headed outside. Where are you going? Wen Xingtian stopped him. Do you still remember Big Head Lei from back then? This bastard is back, but he's only staying in Fenghai for 2 days. Isn't he asking me out for a drink? Xiong Quangren was very impatient. Are you going? Why don't we go together? Big Head Lei? Wen Xingtian narrowed his eyes. Didn't your brother go to Shangjing? Why is he back now? Do you know what he was doing in Shangjing during this time? He looked for you as soon as he came back. You haven't contacted each other for so many years. Why is he looking for you to drink? Xiong Quangren was very impatient. What's wrong with drinking? Just tell me if you're going or not. If you're going, let's go together. If not, hurry up and leave. Don't waste my time. My time is very precious now. Why do I remember that you guys fought a war in the past? When did your relationship become so good? When Xingtian was suspicious. Bullshit. Do you think we haven't fought a lot? If we can't drink after fighting a war, I might have to find ordinary people who have never cultivated to drink. We're all men, and we've known each other for over 100 years. Who cares about the battles we fought in the past? A friendship that has fought together is real. Fuck, fighting together means fighting side by side against the enemy, not fighting each other, right? Wait a minute. When Xingtian frowned, I'm just going out, so I'll go with you. Where are you drinking? First grade firmament. After returning home, Zhuo Xiaojuo and Xiong Quangren checked their injuries and sat in front of the computer again. Well, mainly because Zhuo Xiaojuo was dazzled by Li Chenglong's dazzling operation. The series The Sword King's Life is So Boring was getting more and more popular on the internet. It was so popular that all kinds of emoticons related to the Sword King were flying everywhere. On the other hand, the series leader in high martial arts was also popular all the way and seemed to be catching up. When the young men of the Wu and Jiao families were bored, they would come over to chat with Zhuo Xiaojuo. Every one of them had a friendly expression on their faces. Sometimes, the girls from the two families would come over with their older brothers and younger brothers. They would purse their lips and smile at the side. However, the trend on the internet was gradually changing. Gradually, there were people who started to cause trouble and say strange things. A Xiao Xiantian martial artist actually has such a big name on the internet. Those who don't know would think that he's a master. Isn't that so? A mere Xiantian martial artist can cause such a big commotion. Hee. I really feel sad for this society. Are geniuses so popular? Are they so awesome just because they have beautiful women to support them? The Sun-Moon Pass has been fighting for tens of thousands of years. Why doesn't such a genius put in some effort? It turns out that he can have more fans than the most popular celebrities just by studying in high martial arts. Chapter 462. There were more than 10 seniors who had founded the Hidden Dragon High Martial Arts School. Their life histories, who were the students under each of them, how many of them had shaken the world in the end, how many had died at the Sun-Moon Pass, and how many had become monuments. The glorious deeds of their lives. Slowly, one by one, they were all displayed in front of the world. Among them, there were those who sacrificed themselves heroically to fight against 10,000. There were also those who went back and forth from piles of corpses hundreds of times without regret. There were also those who sacrificed themselves to protect their comrades. And there were also those who resolutely chose to die in front of the pass for the human defense line despite knowing that they would die. Which one of these martyrs is less worthy of praise than your Sword King sect's leader? Bah, the two can't be compared at all. Rashly comparing them is blasphemy and disrespect to these heroes. Slowly, the Iron God sect began to retreat. Many of the Sword King's supporters also rebelled and stood in the other party's position to think about the problem. Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong watched this scene and looked at each other with wonderful expressions. Zhuo, if I'm not wrong, this should be done by our people. Taking advantage of the situation, borrowing the chicken to lay the eggs. Li Chenglong slowly turned his head and looked at Zhuo Xiaojuo with an indescribably strange expression on his face. Zhuo Xiaojuo's face was full of Sparta. What the hell? The first task we gave them actually started by scolding ourselves. Fuck, whose idea was this? What kind of magical brain circuit is this? Li Chenglong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And I have to give them bonuses. This is worse than lifting a rock and dropping it on our own feet. Zhuo Xiaojuo was also dumbfounded. This is not the worst. Maybe we have to praise them for scolding us well and doing a good job. Li Chenglong murmured. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other and felt that there was nothing more wonderful than this. It was difficult to describe in words, and so on. But speaking of the really strong combat strength, Li Chenglong wiped his sweat. I'm about to be scolded. I know there's a reason for this, and it's the result I want. But the process. I've already been scolded. This is what it means to be condemned by 1,000 people. Zhuo Xiaojuo grinned. It feels so good. What should we do now? Li Chenglong scratched his head. What else can we do? You already said it's the process, and you're still asking me how? Zhuo Xiaojuo glared and said, of course we have to continue. Continue to scold them. Scold them as much as you can. Scold Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong to death. Scold these two bastards to death. Make them repent, make them apologize, and make them pay the price. What? Zhuo Xiaojuo snorted and said, the posts about the hierarch and the Sword King were not made by us from the beginning to the end. Moreover, judging from these clues, it should be the Wu family and the Gao family who did it. Water has its source, tree has its roots, and karma runs its own course. Whether or not he has ulterior motives, we don't know, and we don't care. However, we can take this opportunity to completely mess up this matter. It might not be a bad thing. As for being scolded, as long as we don't look at the computer, it doesn't matter if the world is turned upside down. Besides, it doesn't involve personal attacks, so it's not worth mentioning. Zhuo Xiaojuo didn't care. It's not a big deal. Okay then. That night, Ji Yuqi received a message from the big boss. Well done. Of course, manager Ji Yu didn't know how much the big boss gritted his teeth when he typed these words. These words made manager Gu's spirits rise. It seemed that the big boss was also paying attention to the movements on the internet. Vice Principal Gao was roaring, and there was also a domineering voice shouting at the top of his voice. Silver dragons circled and danced in the air. Two masters, each using their full strength, risking their lives to kill each other. The atmosphere of the battle was so intense that the whole campus could hear it. In the end, Vice Principal Wu arrived and shouted, "Stop." As he spoke, he rushed forward to help and separated the two. Unfortunately, Vice Principal Gao was already seriously injured and bathed in blood. If not for his last breath, he would be no different from a dead man. A burly figure opposite him disappeared in a flash without a word. Don't go. Old Xiong, is that you? Vice Principal Wu's shout shook the night sky. The other party did not answer, as if he did not hear it at all. At this moment, Vice Principal Gao, who was attacked, was in a deep coma due to his serious injuries. He had lost his mind, and the injuries he suffered were real and not fake at all. At 4:00 in the morning, all the higher-ups of Hidden Dragon High School gathered together and started a discussion about the attack. Vice Principal Wu was the first to speak. He pointed at Xiong Quangren and said, I want to ask Vice Principal Xiong, what do you want? What do you want to do? How did Vice Principal Gao offend you? Do you have to be so heavy-handed? What deep hatred do you have for him to be so ruthless? Chapter 463. On the other side, Vice Principal Wei added coldly, I heard what Vice Principal Xiong said when we arrested and interrogated the Dao League that day. When Vice Principal Gao's face changed, that means he's guilty, right? But I don't know what Vice Principal Xiong found out. Xiong Quangren was furious and slammed the table. What do you mean? Are you trying to pin the blame on me? Let me tell you, I didn't do it. Haha. The vice principals chuckled together, their eyes cold. Vice Principal Yi, you're the principal of the school. Please give us an explanation. Yi Changqing rubbed the space between his eyebrows. His face was pale with exhaustion, and there was a faint blush on his face. It was obvious that the injury to his heart meridian had become more and more serious after this period of torment. When Xingtian stood up and said coldly, Vice Principal Wu, I'm getting more and more confused. Let's not talk about why Vice Principal Yi is giving you an explanation. Let's talk about the incident itself. I only have one question. What evidence do you have to say that Vice Principal Xiong did it? Who didn't hear the commotion that night? Vice Principal Gao called out Xiong Quangren's name clearly. Is Vice Principal Gao using his old life to accuse Xiong Quangren? Fuck your bullshit. What kind of evidence is that? When Xingtian scolded without any trace of politeness, then what if I go out tonight and shout, saying that you, Vice Principal Wu, beat me up? Will I be able to frame you, Vice Principal Wu? Do you think it's that easy to frame someone? Wen Xingtian said sternly, what I want now is evidence. Witnesses, material evidence, and conclusive evidence. Do you have it? If you can't, then get the fuck out of here. If anyone delays Vice Principal's recovery, I'll be the first to punish them. Wen Xingtian, how can you say that? Who do you think you're talking to? What? I can't speak. I don't like it. Are you going to shout tonight and get beaten up by me, Wen Xingtian? Wen Xingtian sneered, let me tell you, none of my subordinates have ever survived. If you're willing to give it a try, I don't mind at all. I didn't see all of you gathered together when I was doing something serious. Apart from this kind of dirty business, all of you are quite proactive. Everyone knows what's going on. Don't think that your little tricks will have any effect. A bunch of lazy bastards who can't even make it to the main table. Apart from making groundless accusations and framing, what else can you do? Can't you be a little more mature? In any case, all of you are part of the upper echelons of the Hidden Dragon High Martial School. Can't you be a little more upper class? When Xingtian's voice became more and more severe, almost to the point of cursing, Xiong Quangren has done such a thing. Can't we talk about it? Vice Principal Wu said. Can't you understand what I'm saying? Show me the evidence. When Xingtian slammed the table. What are you shouting for? Where's the evidence? This is a society that relies on evidence. Without conclusive evidence, Vice Principal Wu, believe it or not, I'll sue you for slander. What does this have to do with you, Wen Xingtian? Vice Principal Wu was furious. I'm asking about Xiong Quangren. Can you represent him? Bullshit. What does it have to do with you that Jiao Jiyun was attacked? Do I need you to jump out and shout? Can you represent Jiao Jiyun? When Xingtian slammed the table. Why did you come out? Why did I come out? I'm just asking you, are you convinced? If you're not, then come out. I'll teach you. Silence, all of you, silence. Yi Changqing slapped the table and spoke with difficulty. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood onto a white handkerchief. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, his spirit was lifted, and his aura suppressed everyone. And at that time, the one with the surname Gao had already been beaten into a nourishment chamber. Do you have all these witnesses and evidence? Xiong Quangren laughed. Yi Changqing and the others turned their heads and looked at the father and son. Big Head Lei smiled and cupped his hands, saying, we're all acquaintances. After I left Feng Hai, I spent most of my time in Shangjing. Now, I'm working at Shangjing's Yunduan High Martial Arts Academy. Although I'm not involved in teaching and am only a logistics staff, I'm still an employee of Yunduan High Martial Arts Academy. No one has any objections to this, right? When Xingtian said lightly, go on. Begging for monthly and recommendation tickets. It's the first day of September. Everyone, please give me a few as a guarantee. And recommendation tickets, there are so few of them these days. Do you have someone outside? Is this the same situation as yesterday afternoon when we just met? Xiong Quangren's face was ferocious. If you want to continue denying it, it's fine. There are a few acquaintances at the door. I believe they should remember what happened last night, right? Do you want me to call them over? Big Head Lei's face was pale and his eyes were filled with panic. Vice Principal Wu's expression changed and he said angrily, Xiong Quangren, what are you playing at? What am I playing at? Don't worry, just look at it. You'll know once you see it. Xiong Quangren sneered and then fast-forwarded. The image changed to the hotel room. The most eye-catching thing was that the image was still facing the clock on the wall. Instead, it was showing the three of them drinking and chatting. The angle was a little bad, but it was clear enough. At this time, Xiong Quangren said, it's already 11:20 in the blink of an eye. Happy times really pass quickly. Ha ha ha, I haven't drunk enough yet. Big Head Lei laughed. If you haven't drunk enough, then continue drinking. Why do you care what time it is? Old Xiong, didn't you ask for leave? Ha ha, I don't believe you need to ask for leave to drink with me. Seong Kwangren laughed like thunder. Nonsense. Continue drinking. Drink until you're drunk. You must drink until you're drunk. Time passed little by little, and the atmosphere at the table became more and more lively. Seong Kwangren seemed to be drunk. He pointed at the clock on the wall and laughed. Why is this thing shaking? Am I drunk? What time is it? I said it's 1 o'clock. Am I right? Big Head Lei laughed. You're not drunk, old man. It's 1 o'clock. If you're not drunk, then continue drinking. Another hour passed. Seong Kwangren's eyes were blurred, and he nodded. What time is it now? Damn it, this clock doesn't seem right. It's 2:30 now, right? Yes. Big Head Lei said affirmatively. It's 2:30 now. Brother Seong, let's finish 2 more jars. I don't know how you feel, but I've drunk enough. If I drink more, I'll really throw up. Okay. It wasn't until 3:20 p.m. that the drinking session was finally over. Seong Kwangren leaned on the chair in a daze and said, Brother Lei, today was really good. I'm good too. Big Head Lei laughed. Seong Kwangren pressed the pause button. The image stopped. He turned his head and looked at Big Head Lei with eagle-like eyes. Do you have anything to say now? Big Head Lei's face was as pale as paper. He said, everyone heard it. You're the one who's asking. I just played along with you. In fact, the clock in that room is broken. If you don't believe me, we can ask the owner and manager of the Supreme Hotel. Ask them to come and ask. Let them agree with you. Seong Kwangren laughed. A cold voice sounded at the door. There's no need to look for them. They've already gone to my place. Before the voice died away, a bald man stepped in. The man was tall and broad, with a square face and big ears. He looked dignified, but there was not a single hair on his bald head, which slightly reduced his overall image. However, his eyes were majestic, like cold lightning, looking disdainfully at everyone. The man was the director of Starshield in the Central Plains, Jiang Wenju. Behind Director Jiang, there were 2 men in black, who were also wearing the uniform of Starshield. After coming in, he first greeted Yi Changqing, and then said, Hello, everyone. Today, I came here uninvited to testify for Vice President Seong. Everyone should know me. Although my cultivation is shallow and can't reach the apex, there shouldn't be many people who don't know me in Fenghai City. I don't know if you believe what I said. He smiled faintly, and without waiting for everyone to answer, he said, Last night, Vice President Seong suddenly invited us to drink, but he didn't show up. He only booked a room for us and let us drink next to him. I just listened to him talk over there. Hehe, if it weren't for the fact that I couldn't beat him, I would have gone over to beat him. How can he treat us like this? He's just setting up a trap to ruin us. But as soon as he said this, the faces of Big Head Lei, Vice President Wu, Vice President Wei, and the others suddenly changed. Indeed, he was going to ruin someone, but he wasn't going to ruin you, Jiang Wenju. Last night, I was really interested in this pair of father and son. It was because of them that Vice President Seong left us alone. How can I not take a good look? Then, I saw the 2 of them running out. One went out, and the other went out. Their behavior made me even more curious. Jiang Wenju stretched out his hand, and there was also a CD in his hand. I'm excited, so I simply made a video. Are you interested in watching it? Everyone's face darkened. When Xingtian laughed and said, Since it's such a good show, of course we have to watch it. The projector started to work again. It was actually just a segment. Big Head Lei walked out of the room and hurried along the corridor to the toilet in the distance, pausing at the door of the toilet. Jiang Wenju said faintly, This distinguished guest surnamed Lei, you have such a high-end private room. No matter what, there should be a toilet in the room. You actually have to go so far. Did you develop other habits after coming to Shangjing? I don't know what kind of rule this is, but I don't care. Then it paused and disappeared, and continued to play. Big Head Lei could be seen running in like a wisp of smoke. Then he used his hand to dig, and with a puff, he started to vomit. After vomiting, he wiped his face, then took out a bottle and took 2 pills. Then he unbuttoned his pants and peed. His spirit immediately became better, and he walked back. Everyone knows that this drunken Big Dipper is specially brewed for experts. If you drink enough, you can really get half-dead drunk. Even if you have profound Shen skills, you can't evaporate it or resist it. For ordinary people, this drunken Big Dipper is a strong poison. Once you drink it, you'll be drunk for the rest of your life, Jiang Wenju said faintly, but for the drunken Big Dipper, the research and development company also produced a special sobriety medicine. Yes, the one in Brother Lei's hand should be the one. But to be honest, the sales of this medicine are very small. After all, it's rare for a martial artist to get drunk when drinking, and it's even rarer to make us drunk. At least I can't imagine why Brother Lei would carry so many sobriety medicine with him. It's a spectacle. Chapter 465. The projection began to fast forward again. However, what was seen was still Big Head Lei and his son, running out as if changing shifts. One came out, the other came out. The angle of the video seemed to match the time. Even the wall clock in the corridor was not missed. Everything was recorded. This scene continued until 2:30. The father and son had each gone out twice. Xiong Quangren's laughter could be heard. Big Head Lei, your alcohol tolerance has improved. Ha 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 ha. Finally, the camera panned to the room that Big Head Lei had entered. Then, it went to the room next door. There were 7 or 8 Star Shield experts in the room, all sitting upright as if they were watching a show. The dishes on the table were almost untouched. All of them just sat there with meaningful looks on their faces, as if they were watching a good show. Jiang Wenju laughed and said, "This is a good show, isn't it? But it hasn't reached the climax yet. Do you know what I found after that? All the surveillance equipment in the Supreme Hotel was broken at night. However, this is what we specialize in." After he finished speaking, he said lightly, "I wonder if this can prove that Vice Principal Xiong is innocent." Yi Changqing and Wen Xingtian stood up at the same time and said gratefully, "Thank you, Director Jiang." Jiang Wenju smiled lightly. "You're welcome. It's my duty. Last night, I was able to watch such a big show and even participate in it. I was addicted to it, and it even lasted until now. All kinds of twists and schemes made me, a layman, extremely surprised. However, I was still very satisfied. It was an eye-opener, haha." On the other side, Big Head Lei and his son's faces were pale and their eyes were filled with panic. Xiong Quangren slowly turned his head, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. "Big Head, I still want to ask you one question." "Why?" Big Head Lei's eyes were full of despair. His body swayed and he said bitterly, "You saw it. Why else?" Xiong Quangren said, "But I want to know the reason. I want you to answer me personally." Big Head Lei's face was ashen. He said, "Of course there is a reason, but it's too important. Old Xiong, you're destined to lose." At this moment, Yi Changqing let out a fierce roar and shot out explosively. Wen Xingtian also roared, "Stop." However, the blood light instantly dispersed into a thick blood mist with a bang. Only an extremely shrill and miserable laugh could be heard. "Old Xiong, I'm sorry." In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, Big Head Lei's palm smashed the head of his son who was right beside him into pieces. Immediately after, his own tall and sturdy body also softly fell to the ground. Dark red blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth as he looked at Xiong Quangren with a sad smile in his eyes. "I've harmed you today. My life is yours." His body softly fell to the ground, but the corner of his mouth still hung a strange smile. Before Big Head Lei fell, Wen Xingtian's lightning-fast hand had already pinched his chin. "It's too late." Yi Changqing shook his head. The blood that kept flowing out of Big Head Lei's mouth had actually turned blue. He was no longer breathing and had died. "It's orchid heart poison." Yi Changqing grunted and gritted his teeth. Not only the orchid heart poison, he also broke his own heart veins. Otherwise, with his cultivation, even if the orchid heart poison broke out, he would still be able to hold on for a while. Wen Xingtian sighed softly. "All of you, get out of the way." Yi Changqing and Xiong Quangren both sighed a little. Big Head Lei was actually so resolute. The moment the matter was exposed, he was so resolute that he killed his own son. At the same time, he bit open the poison sac. Afraid that he would not die quickly, he even broke his own heart veins at the same time. The three of them looked at each other and felt a wave of palpitations in their hearts. What kind of organization, what kind of death warrior, what kind of scheme would be able to do this? With Big Head Lei's death, the clues were immediately cut off again. Although Jiang Wenju had already taken control of the people in the Supreme Hotel, Yi Chongqing and Wen Xingtian were very clear in their hearts, there would not be any substantial gains over there. Once again, it proved the terror of the enemy. After so many years of waiting, all they got in return was still the surface. I always feel that the incidents have been a little frequent recently. Wen Xingtian lowered his head and transmitted his voice. Yi Chongqing was stunned by this sentence and slowly nodded. Blue blood gradually dripped out of Big Head Lei's mouth and flowed to the ground. Faint blue smoke slowly rose from the ground. The hard alloy floor was slowly corroded and collapsed bit by bit. So ruthless. Jiang Wenju held his breath. With a wave of his hand, he put the bodies of Big Head Lei and his son into the space ring. Then, with a flash of the knife, he cut off the floor that was corroded by the blood and put it into the space ring. Ha ha ha. Vice Principal Wu laughed heartily. After all this time, it turns out that old Xiong is not involved. It's good that is fine. It seems that the murderer is someone else. Director Jiang, it seems that you really have to work hard. This Fenghai city is really not peaceful recently. Vice Principal Wei smiled faintly and said, although old Xiong has a straightforward temper, he always says what he means and means what he says. I also believe that old Xiong is not that kind of bad person. Now that the evidence is conclusive, doesn't everything come to light and the truth comes to light? As for old Gao's matter, there must be something fishy about it. Boss Yi, it seems that we really need to investigate it properly. Vice Principal Wei's face was solemn. As long as we don't investigate your case, the current strength of our manpower is more than enough to deal with the situation. Sigh, I don't even know what to say. Jiang Wenju patted Wen Xingtian's shoulder somewhat dejectedly. In short, I'm very ashamed. I'm very ashamed. Jiang Wenju left these last words and left with his people. I've already controlled the relevant personnel of the Supreme Hotel in the Star Shield General Administration. If the Hidden Dragon needs them, you can go and get them at any time. This is already the limit of what I can do. Watching Jiang Wenju leave, Wen Xingtian's heart was heavy. This confrontation really couldn't be said to be a victory. The other party was completely unreasonable as he threw another punch. Everyone knew that this operation couldn't kill Xiong Quangren at all, but the other party still did it. Since that was the case, there must be a follow-up. Today's repeated twists and turns had blocked the other party's follow-up. But when Xingtian was sure that the other party's follow-up actions wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Otherwise, the other party wouldn't have acted so rashly. If Zhuo Xiaojuo hadn't seen that Xiong Quangren's luck was different in advance, this time, Xiong Quangren and the Hidden Dragon High School would have fallen into a rather passive situation. That's all for today. I forgot that today is the Hungry Ghost Festival, our second biggest festival after the Spring Festival. I'm dizzy from the days. If I don't explode, I won't ask for monthly votes. Just give me a few recommendation votes. Chapter 466. When Xingtian pondered silently as he stood at the school gate. Yi Chongqing walked out of the meeting room, clutching his chest as he walked. Vice Principal Wei followed behind him with a worried expression. Principal, are you all right? I'll be fine for now. Yi Chongqing smiled bitterly. He took out a piece of top-grade Astral Soul's jade from his ring, held it in his hand, and absorbed it. His complexion visibly improved. He smiled bitterly and said, at least there's still some left. I'll be fine for now. Vice Principal Wei said with concern, I've already sent people to look for top-grade Astral Soul's jade. There should be good news soon. Principal, you must hold on. How much do you have left? I'll hurry them up. Yi Chongqing said, although there's still a lot left, we have to use it sparingly. I have less than 300 left. Vice Principal Wei said, use as much as you want. They sent back a message saying that they have found something. I'll go back and hurry them up. He then left with a heavy expression. It was only when he returned to his office that Vice Principal Wei revealed a smile as if he had succeeded in his scheme. Less than 300? Hee. I don't believe you. If you can take out 30 pieces now, I'll kill myself right here and now. Who are you trying to fool? Boss, are we just going to let it go like this? Xiong Quangren looked at Yi Changqing, his face flushed red. You still have other ideas? Yi Changqing looked at Xiong Quangren and frowned. You have to be more careful in the future. Xiong Quangren said angrily, Boss, don't you think what happened today is laughable? Even if there's no evidence prepared beforehand, do you really think you can pin me down with such a small matter? That's ridiculous. Yi Changqing looked at Xiong Quangren coldly. You only see what's right in front of you. How can you pin a vice principal of Hidden Dragon University with such a small matter without any evidence? Yi Changqing said heavily, then why didn't you think about it? If both you and I could think of this, how could the mastermind behind the scenes not think of it? What is it? Xiong Quangren was still confused. Although this is only a pretext, what they need is just a pretext. That's enough, Yi Changqing said indifferently, to be able to set up such a simple, crude, and unreasonable framing. There is only one reason. What reason? I don't believe it. You don't believe me? I can guarantee that if it weren't for those two twists, the other party would have already started their next move. The other party must have made preparations. They only need an excuse to take you down. As long as there's a reason, it's fine. It doesn't need to be sufficient, and it doesn't need real evidence. That's not the main point. Yi Changqing said indifferently, I think the higher-ups, or at least the martial arts department, have made preparations. At this time, all your actions are the key. As long as you make a mistake, or even if it's just a specious mistake. It's just a suspicion, just a groundless suspicion, and you can be put aside for the time being. How can you be a teacher when you're under suspicion? Once the first step is taken, the next step will be to frame you. You'll be put aside. As long as we give you an excuse that we believe in you, but we need to use you at our discretion, what can you do? After you're put aside, they only need to use the method they used to deal with Oldsha, to ruin your reputation through the internet. Naturally, there will be a lot of people who will hit you when you're down. Do you think you'll be a friend your whole life and have no enemies? I think that the mastermind doesn't even need to do it himself. There will be people who will report you to the department. When that time comes, you'll be put aside and have no influence. You can only be beaten by others. You won't have a future for the rest of your life. At least, you won't have a chance to rise again in Hidden Dragon. Yi Changqing said coldly, with your explosive temper, in order to prove your innocence, you'll most likely be like Oldsha and go to the front line to kill the enemy, to fight in the Sun Moon Pass, to fight against the foreign invaders. But, over there, a lone army will be enough to kill you. Yi Changqing looked at Xiong Quangren indifferently. You think nothing is wrong when you went out to drink last night, and that it's normal, right? You didn't think that the brother you acknowledged would betray you, right? So you went out in a relaxed manner. Isn't that right? Let me ask you, if we hadn't discovered this in advance and taken precautions, and the other party continued to walk step by step like this, then in the end, where would you end up? This is a trap designed to deal with your temper and old shurs. It looks simple and crude. It's not presentable, is it? But it's this simple scheme that can make people with explosive tempers like you walk on the path that they want you to take, and even the end. Bury you in the Sun Moon Pass as a hero. Yi Changqing became angrier as he spoke. Suddenly, he kicked Xiong Quangren's burly body 7 or 8 meters away and hit the wall with a loud bang. Dust rustled down. You only know how to be reckless. You only know how to be reckless. 20 years of solitary confinement, all of it is a dog's life. Yi Changqing was fuming with anger. He kicked Xiong Quangren again and again. How many times have you thought about these twists and turns of the road ahead? You think they're just trying to slander you? To disgust you? Bastard. They want you to die. Yi Changqing lowered his voice and cursed. Xiong Quangren was suddenly happy after being beaten. Boss, your injury healed. Touching his butt, he suddenly looked happy. You kicked me so hard just now. Why don't you do it again? I want to feel it again, not. Yi Changqing looked at Xiong Quangren's joyful face and suddenly felt a lump in his throat. He suddenly thought of another face. A brother with a square face and a fiery temper. Suddenly, his heart ached and he felt sad. It was these good brothers who, like him, had made a blood oath to bring the hidden dragon martial arts to greater heights. They wanted to nurture the pillars of the continent and the pillars of the sea for the human race. His brothers followed him and entered the hidden dragon school wholeheartedly. In the blink of an eye, more than 1,000 years had passed. Countless students, under the guidance of their brothers, walked out of the hidden dragon and became pillars of the society. Every year, when a batch of students graduated, the brothers would gather together to drink and get drunk on this achievement. Every 2 years, they would go to the frontline martyrs' cemetery to see their students in eternal rest. They would cry their hearts out. Year after year had passed. Until now. Now, everyone was old. And the Hidden Dragon School had also climbed to an extremely high position. It gradually transformed into an excellent springboard for power. As long as they entered for a few years, they would be qualified to be a leader when they left. This was because every genius student that walked out was a shining achievement in the political career of the politicians. This was a political compromise, a balance of power. However, this path that was getting better and better made some people dissatisfied. They were not satisfied with the positions given by the Hidden Dragon School. They started to want more and took action. However, some of the key positions were always occupied and controlled by us old people. So they started to use tricks. They understood the temper of their brothers and stabbed them one by one. They targeted their character weaknesses and made them fall one by one. First, they used a bucket of water from the River of Forgetfulness to throw out Xiong Quangren, who was the least safe. Because they knew that as long as Xiong Quangren was there, the Hidden Dragon School could also be unreasonable. Once something happened, Xiong Quangren could really go crazy and fight. Politicians usually cherished their lives the most. They did not want to take such risks. So they first got rid of Xiong Quangren in the safest way. Then, they targeted Old Shi's explosive character and his unwillingness to be wronged. They created the prostitution incident. How could they not know that with Old Shi's temper, he would definitely not be able to tolerate this? But they could not vent their anger in Fenghai. The only place they could go was the border. Kill the enemy at the border. But this was exactly what they wanted. In the end, Old Shi fell into eternal rest at the Sun Moon Pass. He died with regret. Old Liu's serious and responsible character towards his students. Knowing that Old Liu was different from others, other people might choose to strategically retreat. But Old Liu would not. As long as a student was still in danger, he would not retreat. Because each and every one of these students was his flesh and blood. Such a targeted game directly beat Old Liu into a useless person. Then, they targeted Old Liu's temper, which was easy to go to extremes. One by one, they took action one by one, and succeeded again and again. Until today, they directly started to frame Xiong Quangren. Moreover, they used the method of betraying his brothers to deal with him, to plot against him. Fortunately, Zhuo Xiaojuo had discovered it in advance, causing them to be on guard. If they succeeded, Xiong Quangren's anger and disheartened brother betrayed him, he would leave the Sun Moon Pass in a rage and follow in the footsteps of Vice Principal Shi. It was almost certain that he would leave. After that, the situation would not change at all. Even if everyone knew that they were wronged, it would still be the same. Xiong Quangren would never be able to rise again in the Hidden Dragon School. Old Xiong. Yi Changqing held Xiong Quangren's broad shoulders sadly and said softly, "We must hold on. Our old brothers are almost gone. This is our real base." "No, the Sun Moon Pass isn't our base." Xiong Quangren was silent for a moment and said, "Yes. People like Big Head Lei were never your brothers. You don't have to feel bad for him." Yi Changqing patted him on the shoulder. "You just need to remember one thing. If he was really your brother, why would he hurt you? If he was really your brother, You wouldn't have invited Jiang Wenju yesterday and brought the camera equipment with you. Also, in your words, you repeatedly set a trap for him. Although he was the one who hurt you, when you asked about the time. What were you thinking? Yi Changqing said earnestly, so. This is our victory. It is not the betrayal of a friend or a brother. Big Head Lei is not qualified, and he is not worthy. Do you understand? When Xingtian was dumbfounded by this scene, he did not know how to react for a long time. Assistant. Where's the assistant teacher? Zhuo Xiaojuo shouted. Have you contacted the nutrition cabin? The assistant teacher was already sweating profusely. His face was pale. Yes. Throw them in one by one to heal their wound. Zhuo Xiaojuo sneered. He pulled the sword out of the last student's buttocks and kicked the bloody wound. He said, you guys are just a bunch of rotten potatoes and rotten eggs. You call this a sneak attack? You're basically stealing cats, right? I'll be honest with you. I've already shown you a lot of mercy. Look at how useless you are. It's really shameful. How dare you call yourselves geniuses? Don't say that you came from the same class as me in the future. I think you're shameful. Geniuses. Each of you is holding a sword and chattering. What are you doing? Performing an opera? Are you afraid that others won't know? Go to the nutrition cabin to heal your wounds. I'll still attack you in the afternoon. If you're strong enough, you can also attack me. You're welcome to try. Zhuo Xiaojuo urged impatiently. Class monitors were. We won't bother you in the afternoon. Xiong Chong covered his buttocks and begged for mercy. We'll attack each other ourselves. I won't show any mercy. The other students also begged for mercy. Let us go. Class monitors were. Class monitor, please have mercy. Zhuo Xiaojuo was furious. Fuck, how dare you beg for mercy? Do you beg for mercy to your enemies? Will they be merciful and let you go? Can you be any more shameless? It seems that this afternoon's lesson is definitely not enough. I've decided to attack you for 7 mornings, 7 afternoons, and 7 nights. I'm going all out. I'll take care of you all day and night. Look forward to it, geniuses. Half of them fainted immediately after hearing this. They did not know if they fainted from anger or fear. Finally, the teaching assistant led everyone away. 34 people hid behind Li Chenglong and huddled together like quails. 68 fearful gazes. Li Chenglong mustered up his courage. Zhuo. Really eat. Of course. Why don't you look at the time? Hurry up, if you don't go, there won't be any food left. Zhuo Xiaojuo urged again. Everyone came out carefully and walked towards the cafeteria with Zhuo Xiaojuo. Everyone still subconsciously distanced themselves from him. Every single one of them looked at Zhuo Xiaojuo as though they were little white rabbits looking at the great demon king, filled with indescribable fear and trembling. Just now, when Zhuo Xiaojuo gathered everyone together and stabbed them one by one with his sword, it was too scary. Chapter 468. Even though everyone's bodies had recovered, they still felt a piercing pain in that area from time to time. Well, this was a problem with the human body. The pain was real and would not disappear just because the body had recovered. Zhuo Xiaojuo swaggered in front, leading the way. The further he went, the slower he became. Slowly, he merged into the crowd. With a smile on his face, he asked kindly, Xiong Chong, little bug, does your butt still hurt? Speaking of which, the sword made your bones creak. The sound was nice, right? Bing Dan, your shoulder doesn't hurt anymore, right? I didn't even stab you anywhere else. Yu Yang your shoulder doesn't hurt anymore, right? Pai Yibao, is your butt better? Are you okay? I'll rub it with my sword in the afternoon. Hao Han, how is it? Does it feel good? Does it feel good? Meng Zhongjun, does it feel good? Does it feel good? Didn't you always want to challenge me? Are you satisfied? Haha. Why does everyone have such an expression? Whoever was asked would shudder, and their faces would turn as pale as paper in a second, without a trace of blood. Class monitors were. Pai Ebao trembled. Much better. Much better. Ha 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 ha, then we can continue in the afternoon. Phut. Hey you, I accidentally stabbed you in the chest. Are you okay now? Are you okay? No. I'm fine. Cough cough. Are you okay? That's good, that's good. You scared me. I thought I sent you away with my sword. So stabbing the right chest won't kill you? Ha 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 ha. I'll do the same for them in the afternoon. Oh right, is there anyone who was born with an abnormality? Their heart is on the right side. I'll prepare in advance. As soon as he said that, countless resentful gazes focused on the student who was being questioned. They were like small flying daggers. In the cafeteria, the people who were watching the show from above immediately noticed this strange phenomenon. Class 1 was originally the most united class. However, at this moment, they were walking in a strange formation. The person in front was unprecedentedly arrogant and flashy. He was as awe-inspiring and domineering as a general. He walked over like a crab. Just by walking, he walked like a crab. The group of arrogant geniuses behind him were now cowering like a group of quails in the cold wind. They didn't even dare to take a step forward. What was going on? Looking at how well you guys are dressed, it doesn't seem like anything has happened. Why did they all look so scared? At this moment, someone ran up to the door. The first grade's class 1 is here. Who's leading the team? Zhuo Duo. All right. One of the youths stood up. Today, our second grade class 4 will take back the table that belongs to the second grade. Before he could say anything, he heard Zhuo Xiaoduo's voice from downstairs. It's the second grade's class 4's turn now, right? Is there anyone who wants to snatch a table? If there is, hurry up and come down. I won't go up. The arrogant voice paused for a moment before saying, if I go up, I'll have to come down. If I come down, I'll have to go up again. It's too troublesome. Hurry up and come down. After the fight, I'll go up and eat. Let's eat to our heart's content. How arrogant. Everyone in the second grade's class 4 had surging anger in their eyes. Class monitor, beat him to death. Okay. The class monitor of class 4 jumped down. Zhuo Xiaoduo, I'm coming. Following this sound, black skulls popped out from the window above. Originally, there were people who wanted to snatch a table downstairs, but not many people looked at them. They felt that it was meaningless. However, when Zhuo Xiaoduo arrived, those who were eating also stuck their heads out with food in their mouths. In an instant, there was a dense crowd of heads. They saw Zhuo Xiaoduo walking over like he didn't recognize anyone. His head was tilted to the side and his face was full of arrogance. And he walked over like a crab. Everyone felt like they were hallucinating. Is there a villain in our school? What's more, this villain was showing off in front of all the decent students. He was insufferably arrogant. According to the plot of a typical novel, this was not far from the time when the main character appeared. However, who would be the main character? Would the class monitor of class 4, the chief of class 4, be able to do it? 20 to 30 geniuses from the Wu and Gao families stood in different directions, cheering for Zhuo Xiaoduo. Then, under everyone's gaze, the two of them rushed up like a whirlwind and tangled together. However, after 3 consecutive bangs, the class monitor of class 4 staggered back. Zhuo Xiaoduo laughed arrogantly and jumped up. His dragon's leg appeared and disappeared like a ghost. He kicked the class monitor right in the crotch. The class monitor of class 4 groaned and clutched his crotch. His entire body was sent flying up the stairs from the ground. Below, Zhuo Xiaoduo struck a suave pose with his leg facing the sky. Then, he slowly retracted his leg and laughed strangely. He waved his hand and said, "It's done. Let's eat." Everyone who witnessed this scene was dumbfounded and flabbergasted. This class monitor of Zhuo Xiaoduo. Why was he getting stronger and stronger? They remembered that when he fought with the class monitor of class 7, he fought for quite a while. But now Zhuo Xiaoduo walked up the stairs and laughed. Next time, it should be class 3, right? Ha 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 ha. Countless senior students were speechless. If you want to steal a table, then just steal a table. Why did you have to make it seem like a villain? It was really intoxicating. According to the plot of a novel, this kind of villain should be KO'd by the main character. Main character, come out. However, after waiting for a long time, the main character did not appear. All the students of Class 4 stood and ate with sullen faces. However, when they saw the students of Class 1, they felt a little better. These students of Zhuo Xiaoduo's class all looked abnormal. They were all very careful, especially the two who sat next to Zhuo Xiaoduo. Only half of their buttocks were on the chairs. When they ate, their hands were trembling. What was going on? This is your classmate, your class monitor, and your inevitable leader when you enter society. Why do you all give off the feeling of being together with the great demon king? I really don't understand. Under everyone's gaze, Zhuo Xiaoduo finished his meal and strode out of the cafeteria. After Zhuo Xiaoduo left, the students of Class 1 by 1 also filed out of the cafeteria. Other than the two who stayed behind on duty, everyone else quickly left. The two who stayed behind looked as if they had just been pardoned, as if they had just escaped a huge disaster. What's wrong? We're all classmates. Why are you so scared? I don't think it's fear, it's fear. Ahem. It's a long story. Don't ask, I have to wash the dishes. I also have to go back and cultivate. If I get back late. The other one shivered. Damn, don't say any more. I'm so cold now. Wash the dishes. In the afternoon, all the students were looking forward to the arrival of their homeroom teacher, Wen Xingtian. If when Xingtian came, they would be able to escape from Zhuo Xiaoduo's evil clutches. They might even be able to enjoy a good show of teacher when beating up the left demon king. However, after waiting and waiting, all they got was disappointment. When Xingtian did not come. Waha! Come, all of you, let's play a sneak attack game of 1 versus 35. Of course, if you choose to fight head-on, I'll welcome you. Come on, students. Zhuo Xiaoduo shouted excitedly. The 35 people's faces were pale as they walked out, each of them looked as if they were about to be executed. It was only a day's time. Zhuo Xiaoduo had another nickname. Originally, it was Sword King, Class Monitor Zhuo, and Zhuo. But now, there was another one, Demon King Zhuo. Indeed. In the eyes of the ordinary students, Zhuo Xiaoduo was a real demon king. Even if it was a real life and death battle, it was just a quick swing of the sword. But this demon king Zhuo would cut your flesh bit by bit with a sword after cutting it open. Then, he would explain to you bit by bit, what would it feel like to stab here and stir it like this? What would it feel like to stir it in the opposite direction? Then, with a serious face, he would use your own flesh to discuss with you how to fight, how to exert strength, how to make the enemy lose his fighting ability. This feeling was simply indescribable. A terrifying nightmare. However, the strange thing was, after being done like this 6 times in a day, although it was still the same pain, she would still be afraid when she saw Zhuo Xiaoduo. She would tremble uncontrollably as if it was a conditioned reflex. But everyone was much calmer, so much so that at night, they could discuss with each other, what would it feel like to stab a sword into your flesh? What would it feel like? When it stab into your flesh, it doesn't hurt much. What would it feel like? What would it feel like to twist and push outward? Did it stab into your bone seam? No. Damn, why are you so lucky? You're so lucky. When the sword stabbed into my bone seam, Demon King Zhuo was prying it open while discussing with me how to cut the bone and tendon. Don't mention it. When my calf bone was scraped until it was crunching, he carefully introduced to me what kind of nerve was being scraped here. What the fuck? TSK, you're just my calf. Why are you shouting? Demon Kings were cut open my chest with a sword and then peeled off my flesh. He pointed at my heart and asked me why my heart was fine. He forced me to lower my head and see how my heart was beating. He even asked me if I wanted to cut half of it to taste. Damn it, I only scolded him once. This bastard tore off one of my ribs and then discussed with me how to put it back. The students of Class 1 were discussing and talking about their cruel experiences. Each and every one of them had a look of exultation on their faces. As they spoke, they were trembling, their teeth were chattering, and their faces were pale. However, they were actually showing off their accents, as if it was something to brag about being tortured like this. In just a few days, they had improved so much that it was as if they had been reborn. Looking at the battle in detail, Wen Xingtian was shocked by the ruthlessness of their attacks. There were a few times when he wanted to stop them, but he held himself back. Compared to the ruthlessness of their attacks, Wen Xingtian was more surprised by their defense. They were simply protecting him from head to toe. During lunch, a fellow villager from the garrison store came over to greet Hao Han. As soon as he approached Hao Han's back, he was thrown to the ground by Hao Han. Then, a sharp knife was stabbed into his lower abdomen. In an instant, blood spurted out. The homeroom teacher of class 3 immediately cursed. "What the fuck, we're eating now. Wen Xingtian, are you training killers? This is a fucking lesson for the next semester. What the fuck are you doing?" Wen Xingtian was also speechless. How can I not know that this is a lesson for the next semester? But the problem now is that I'm not the one who's training them. Class 1 sneak attacks had now become a real sneak attack, an extreme sneak attack by any means necessary. In the middle of the night, with a loud bang, the window was blown away. With an explosion, 6 people jumped out at the same time wrapped in quilts. Shrapnel flew everywhere. In the middle of the night, the Dean of Academic Affairs jumped and cursed, "Wen Xingtian, how can the students in your class play with bombs? Fucking pay for it yourself. Are you teaching killers, pirates, or students? Damn, half of a building has collapsed. Is this still a place to sleep? Aren't you afraid that your students will be blown to pieces? Damn, if this goes on, something will definitely happen." He checked. Nothing happened. Not a single one of them got into trouble. Hey! But isn't this too much? The next day, Wen Xingtian threw a tantrum in front of the whole class, but he didn't explicitly forbid this kind of torturous training method. He only let Xiong Chong and the others pay a fine and also announced that whoever caused the trouble would be responsible for cleaning up the mess. Bombs were prohibited in the school. The training continued as usual. After all, Wen Xingtian couldn't ask for more in such a cultivation environment. Why would he forbid it? He had a clear feeling. Perhaps this time, he could really teach a batch of real war machines. Students who grew up in such an environment, not to mention other things, just smiling at the 4 words of life and death was really fun for them, and as a teacher, he couldn't do such a thing. Even if a teacher did so, the impact on them would definitely not be as strong as Zhuo Xiaoduo's. Let Zhuo Xiaoduo train these guys fiercely. Wen Xingtian was very satisfied. He never thought that it was too cruel or too perverted. Because most of the students would face such a combat environment in the future, a real life and death environment that was even crueler than now. He was confident that if this went on, in the future, in the same danger, half of the students from other classes might die, but this group of students from class 1 wouldn't even get hurt. It was such a huge and obvious difference. But the students from other classes, how can they improve like this? Wen Xingtian was now thinking about this problem. If all of them are trained by Zhuo Xiaoduo, will it be too cruel and cause a social outcry? Or will it delay Zhuo Xiaoduo's own cultivation progress? In the afternoon of the second day, Zhuo Xiaoduo had just finished school. When he returned to the entrance of his villa, he saw a car parked there. Next to the car, there was a young man standing there with a smile on his face. That young man was Gao Chengxiang, the descendant of the Gao family. Brothers were. Gao Chengxiang had to come alone this time. There was no one else accompanying him. When he saw Zhuo Xiaoduo, his smile became even brighter. During this period of time, almost all the students from the Gao family and the Wu family who were studying at the Hidden Dragon High School were familiar with Zhuo Xiaoduo's face. In school, as long as Zhuo Xiaoduo came in and out, especially during lunch, the probability of encountering these two families was almost 100%. Zhuo Xiaoduo didn't have any intention to resist. He always responded with hums and laughs. He was neither servile nor overbearing, and greeted them at a distance that was neither too far nor too close. As for these children of the aristocratic families, they didn't feel offended by Zhuo Xiaoduo's reaction. Or rather, it should be said that when it came to dealing with Zhuo Xiaoduo, they really showed the self-restraint and demeanor of the children of the aristocratic families. "Brother Jiao, why are you here?" Zhuo Xiaoduo was a little surprised. Jiao Chengxiang laughed. "I just happened to be out with Chao today. When I passed by here, I remembered that you live next to the principal, so I came to take a look." "Don't tell me you don't welcome me." Zhuo Xiaoduo was stunned. "Chao." The car door opened. Jiao Chao walked out of the car with a sweet smile. "Hello, class monitors were." "Hello." Vice class monitor Li Jiao Chao was dressed in white. She was like a fairy. Her hair was fluttering in the wind. Coupled with her delicate face, she was a peerless beauty that could topple a city. One had to admit that Jiao Chao was indeed one of the 4 beauties in Fenghai. Li Chenglong scratched his head and said, "Why don't you come in and sit?" Zhuo Xiaoduo immediately glared at him. Jiao Chao and Jiao Chengxiang both laughed. "That's what I was thinking. It would be best if I could taste the tea leaves of the 2 class monitors." As they spoke, they took out a big bag of gifts from the trunk. Zhuo Xiaoduo and Li Chenglong couldn't help but be puzzled by their actions. They were stunned on the spot. This. Jiao Chao smiled sweetly and said, "Please say it." Zhuo Xiaoduo said generously, "As long as it's within my ability, I'll definitely do it." Jiao Chao smiled softly and said, "We only heard recently that Class Monitor Zhuo is a legendary person in Phoenix City. The well-known Master Zhuo. We're really disrespectful." Zhuo Xiaoduo's eyes focused. For the first time, he sized up Jiao Chengxiang and Jiao Chao seriously. His expression also became serious, and cautious for the first time. The Jiao family is indeed well informed. Jiao Chao's eyelids drooped slightly. She paused and said, "It's said that Master Zhuo knows the past and the future 500 years. With one look, he can predict a person's life and death. I also heard that Master Zhuo once said that he's the best in appearance, second in wealth, and last in cultivation. It's hard for ordinary people to imagine such confidence." "So?" Chao presumptuously asked for Master Zhuo's guidance. Zhuo Xiaoduo narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Oh? Looking for monthly votes and recommendation vote. Subscribe." Chapter 470. Jiao Chao smiled faintly. She took out 100 pieces of high-grade jade of astral souls and placed them on the table. She slowly pushed them over and said, "Chao knows squad leaders was rules. I'll give you the divination gold now. Master Zhuo, please don't think it's too little." Zhuo Xiaoduo chuckled. "This amount is indeed quite a lot. It's convenient for others and convenient for yourself. What does Miss Chao want to ask? Do you want to ask about your future, marriage, or something else?" Jiao Chao's beautiful eyes were slightly dazed. She said softly, "I want to ask squad leader Zhuo to take a look at my fate." "Fate?" Zhuo Xiaoduo's expression became serious. He carefully looked at Jiao Chao's face and said softly, "Miss Chao's life will be peaceful and smooth. She will have both good fortune and wealth. It's really a good life." Jiao Chao smiled like a spring flower and said, "Really?" Zhuo Xiaoduo nodded solemnly and said, "Of course it's true." Jiao Chao smiled and stood up. "Thank you, squad leader Zhuo, for pointing out the right path. With squad leader Zhuo's words, I will naturally believe you without any doubt." Jiao Chengxiang also stood up and said with a smile, "This trip is really worth it. Squad leader Zhuo, we'll go back first." Zhuo Xiaoduo laughed. "You'll have a safe trip." The siblings smiled and left one after another. They got into the car and left. Li Chenglong didn't come out to say goodbye or drink tea. After a while, Li Chenglong came out with a cup of tea. He looked at Zhuo Xiaoduo sitting in his seat with a solemn face and couldn't help but say softly, "They found out about your divination." Zhuo Xiaoduo nodded softly. This time, Gao Chengxiang and his sister didn't come for fortune-telling. They came to report. Then, it's dangerous. Li Chenglong took a deep breath and said, "It's just that this time, you did it too obviously." However, with 2 consecutive operations being disrupted without warning, anyone would be suspicious. Zhuo Xiaojuo held his head in his hands, crossed his legs, and leaned back. His eyes were full of thoughts. Everything has a cause and effect, and vice versa. The current situation is an inevitable result, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. Ari. Li Chenglong said worriedly, "Boss, what you did in Phoenix City that day was simply too high profile." Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled faintly. He naturally knew what Li Chenglong meant. Back then, in Phoenix City, he didn't care about the risks and displayed his manifestation art. Back then, Hu Ruoyun, Li Changjiang, He Yuan Yu, and Qin Fangyang had all warned him not to be so high profile. Everyone here was a veteran of the Jianghu. Anyone could tell that there would be trouble in the future if they kept such a high profile. Once the disaster erupted, it would be a matter of life and death. However, Zhuo Xiaojuo didn't listen and stubbornly carried on. Even when he arrived at Fenghai, he was still the same. No one knew why, only Zhuo Xiaojuo himself knew. If he didn't earn enough providence points at that time, if he wasn't trusted and attracted attention, if he didn't use this ability to create a storm in Phoenix City as soon as possible, Zhuo Xiaoyan wouldn't have been able to survive. Therefore, even though he knew that doing so would bring him endless suffering in the future, he could only stubbornly carry on and walk the path to the end. At that time, Zhuo Xiaojuo didn't care about the future. His eyes were only focused on the present, the time before the deadline. As he said just now, everything had a cause and effect. Now, the consequences of his high profile back then were presented here. Looking at the Phoenix Pulse spirit back then, Mu Yangyang originally only planned to protect herself and at most call for 2 more teachers. However, with such a lineup, Zhuo Xiaoyan was more than likely going to die. There was no chance of survival. Even after Zhuo Xiaoduo's reminder, 4 more people came from the mountain gate. Under normal circumstances, such a lineup of protectors was already extravagant. However, in reality, it was still far from enough. There were even many side effects. Zhuo Xiaojuo spared no effort to stir up the situation. In a suicidal manner, he used his own physiognomy to create a boundless storm. He reversed heaven and earth, reversed feng shui, reversed yin and yang, and thought of ways to invite Qin Fangyang, Sister Lan, Qiu Yunshang, Starshield General Headquarters, and finally, 2 shadow bodyguards of the superstar Jiyu Luoyang. He expanded Zhuo Xiaoyan's protectors beyond imagination. However, even so, if Fang Yinuo hadn't changed sides at the last minute, the situation at that time would have been a complete failure. At that time, how could Zhuo Xiaojuo have been able to turn the situation around while hiding his strength? If Zhuo Xiaojuo was like an ordinary person who kept his physiognomy a secret and rarely revealed it after obtaining it, he would only reveal it at critical moments when he had no other choice. In that case, Zhuo Xiaoyan would definitely die in the Phoenix Pulse spirit. Zhuo Xiaojuo was never a fool. When he made a name for himself in school and even took the initiative to brag about himself, he had already thought of the consequences. Since he had exposed himself, no matter how small Phoenix City was, if someone wanted to investigate in the future, they would eventually be able to find out. The so-called blocking of information was meaningless and useless. Since he had the physiognomy, he couldn't just abandon it. Not to mention the factor of fate points, how could he not remind his future friends, brothers, and teachers when they were about to die? Perhaps if he reminded them once, they wouldn't notice. But what about twice or thrice? The other party clearly had an extremely tight plan, so why were you able to make the corresponding preparations in advance? What was the reason for this? The other party's last-minute plan was not even known to their own people. As the target, how could they have prepared a counterattack in advance? Could it be that they could predict the future? All explanations were eliminated. Then, even the most ridiculous possibility would become inevitable. They really could predict the future. Even if they had such suspicions, they would investigate in this direction. Zhuo Xiaoduo's previous actions would be exposed immediately and exposed in front of everyone. And this would also be the most dangerous time for Zhuo Xiaojuo. Zhuo Xiaojuo had already known and understood everything that had happened. He had also predicted this kind of disastrous outcome. But he had no choice. He could only take it one step at a time. When he saw that Xiong Quangren was about to die, how could he not expose him? When he saw that Xiong Bing and Xiong Chong were about to die, how could he not expose them? He had no choice but to take it one step at a time and take it one step at a time. Otherwise, why would Zhuo Xiaojuo prepare so many backup plans for himself? So many trump cards. Ever since Zhuo Xiaojuo exposed his physiognomy, he had been tirelessly preparing one trump card after another for the sake of saving his life one day in the future. It would give him a higher chance of survival. He had been following Qin Fengyang's words and said that his spirit cat sword was given to him by Marshal Dongfang. This was indeed boasting shamelessly and spouting nonsense, but Zhuo Xiaojuo was still desperately trying to cover himself with a protective talisman. His parents might be big shots, but they couldn't make a move right now. Once he provoked an unbeatable enemy, it would only harm his parents and delay their cultivation. Since that was the case, he had no choice but to shoulder everything himself. Among the three famous schools, Zhuo Xiaojuo had never thought of going to Yunduan or Ancestral Dragon. Because Zhuo Xiaonian's target was Shongjing. Yunduan and Ancestral Dragon were both located in Shongjing. Zhuo Xiaojuo could not go to the same place as Zhuo Xiaonian. Why? Because once his good deeds were exposed, it would be followed by great danger. He could rely on his ability to predict good and bad luck and adapt to the situation at any time. But Zhuo Xiaonian couldn't do it. Being implicated by him once, he might lose his life. This wasn't something Zhuo Xiaonuo wanted to see. Naturally, he had to avoid it as far as possible. But now, he was still noticed. And almost immediately, he was noticed. This reaction speed was very fast. Unforeseen events keep happening. If I don't want to stand by and do nothing, then I can't avoid it. Li Chenglong sat down and began to think seriously. Looking at the current world, Li Chenglong was the first to understand Zhuo Xiaojuo. Even father and mother Zhuo and Zhuo Xiaonian were temporarily behind. This time, Xiong Chong and Xiong Bing's incident was a last-minute plan. Logically speaking, it should be very difficult to stop it. But in the end, the culprit did not get anything. Instead, they were all captured and implicated in the Dao League. The development of this incident is strange and abnormal. It defies common sense. If I were the culprit, I would inevitably have such doubts. If such a plan failed, it would not be completed. If Xiong Chong and Xiong Bing's strength was beyond estimation and caused the failure of the operation, then it is still acceptable. But we have already determined the level of strength of Xiong Chong and Xiong Bing and set up an inescapable trap to target them. But it still failed. It is really incomprehensible, Li Chenglong said. As the one who set up the trap, it is inevitable that he will reflect on what went wrong. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, I think. The culprit planned a second operation in a very short time. With that kind of illogical and flawed framing action, there must be other considerations. It would be best if it succeeded. Even if it didn't, there would be other gains. Li Chenglong frowned and said, in other words, Vice Principal Xiong was not purely testing this time? Definitely not. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, if it succeeded, Vice Principal Xiong would be in a terrible fix. At the very least, he would have to be temporarily transferred from his post. But if it didn't succeed, then the key countermeasure would be confirmed. The attention would immediately shift to me. This is also obvious. Because Master Zhuo's reputation is really not small. At least in the area of Phoenix City, it is really not small. Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled bitterly. But just now, why did Jiao Qiao and Jiao Chengxiang come to inform you? Are they expressing goodwill? Li Chenglong said, at the very least, they didn't come here to ask you for a fortune-telling session. They came here to tell you that the Jiao family is already suspecting you. We have to accept this favor. Zhuo Xiaojuo nodded slowly. Or there is another hint. That is, the Jiao family in the capital has already noticed you, so they ordered the Jiao family in Fenghai City to deal with you. Otherwise, they would not have sent Jiao Qiao to inform you. Li Chenglong could not understand. He said, "But what I don't understand is, why did Jiao Qiao come to inform you? Wouldn't this destroy their family's plan? Contradict themselves?" Li Chenglong frowned. Zhuo Xiaoduo said lightly, "It is still karma. Feng Hai's Jiao family will still not deal with me now. That is why they sent the message. Even the disciples of the Jiao family are not pretending to be friends with me. Even if it is because they do not know, but at least it is true. You should know that if I die now, Feng Hai's Jiao family will still be unlucky." Zhuo Xiaoduo said lightly, "The matter of the life and death arena of the Longhu list is not over yet. So the Jiao family is now more anxious to disassociate themselves from my life and death. From Feng Hai's Jiao family's point of view, being targeted by the capital's Jiao family means that I am dead for sure. What they want to do is, those teachers who used to think highly of me, don't implicate their family in my death. They cannot bear that kind of revenge. And Jiao Qiao came to inform me. Whether it is her family's intention or her own, she can disassociate herself from the Jiao family after my death. It is a good move." Zhuo Xiaoduo said calmly. "The older generation is scheming, and the younger generation is hot-blooded. No matter how things develop in the future, they will walk on two legs. Because for us, this is after all a big favor." Li Chenglong connected the dots and thought about it thoroughly. At the same time, he had a sudden realization. At the same time, he also felt a chill run down his spine. The older generation of the Jiao family wants to eat your blood. Do you intend to obtain a considerable amount of benefits from your inevitable death? The goodwill they have shown will put them in an invincible position. They can even become the biggest winner. Hiss. Li Chenglong was shocked. With this kind of scheming, their intelligence was definitely not low. Zhuo Xiaoduo smiled. So, swish swish, these big families that have been passed down for hundreds and thousands of years. Don't treat them as fools. Every person from such a family can be a scheming person. Underestimating them is like playing with your life. You can't afford to be careless. Children from ordinary families like us can't compare to the children from the great clans in terms of background. This is the problem of innate knowledge. It is not something we can compare to. As for the older generation of these clans, I can't say that every single one of them is a cunning old fox. Other than when they are blinded by hatred or when someone can take advantage of them, when they are clear-headed, it is impossible to scheme against them. They are all old swindlers. Zhuo Xiaoduo sighed. How can there be any fools in such a big family? Li Chenglong's face was very serious. He said, "Yes, yes, yes. Previously, my attitude was wrong. In the future, I will definitely not lower my guard against these families." Zhuo Xiaoduo nodded. "But now, what should we do?" Li Chenglong asked. "Try to make the intelligence of both sides as high as possible. It will be very tiring. Everyone, please be patient. There will be an update in the afternoon. Looking for a few recommendation votes." Chapter 471. Zhuo Xiaoduo stood up and walked in front of the full-length mirror. He looked at his own face in the mirror and saw that there was a faint dark aura on it. He said lightly, "Physiognomy looks at people but not at oneself. Actually, the main thing is that I can't see my own situation clearly. Compared to other people who can see things clearly, I can't see my own situation clearly. For example, when I look at myself now, my complexion shows that something bad is going to happen. Naturally, I have to avoid it. But the problem is that no matter how I avoid it, something bad will still happen when I try to avoid it. This is why I can't see myself by looking at people's faces. Therefore, physiognomy can only look at oneself. Don't make any rash judgments. For a physiognomy, one can only take one step at a time." Li Chenglong volunteered, "You can also look at me as a reference. I'm with you every day. If you look at me, can't you see things clearly? Maybe you can do something by looking at me." Zhuo Xiaoduo nodded. "That's one direction. However, if we encounter any sudden danger, only one of us can die. We can't let you go. So the best choice now is to use external forces to fight. Li Chenglong's eyes lit up. Should we tell teacher Wen and the others? Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled. Of course, we have to tell them. But now. The first thing we have to do is to make sure that we have no blind spots. His eyes were shining. Do you think I should start a live broadcast? Put myself directly under the spotlight? Li Chenglong grinned. That's a way. But this method can't last long. Do you think you can do a live broadcast for 24 hours? Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed. How can I not know this? Li Chenglong said, besides, there's already the Sword King, Gao Wu Sheng Ya. If you do a live broadcast, there will probably be more people scolding us. The key is that we will be exposed more and more, but we won't be able to guard against them. Zhuo Xiaojuo lay on the bed and said, you think about it again. I'll think about it too. Anyway, there's no hurry now. The other party just has this plan. They might not take action immediately. Li Chenglong snorted, frowning as he racked his brains. He turned on his computer and leaned in front of it. While reading the news, he was still thinking about this matter. Suddenly, he asked, Zhuo, I've always been in command. Where's your online account? My account. Zhuo Xiaoduo's heart was in turmoil. He calculated little by little and said casually, it's on my computer. Who has the time to care about that now? Li Chenglong's curiosity was piqued. I've known Zhuo Xiaojuo for quite some time now, but this brat has never told me what his online username is, and I didn't manage to get it out of him when I asked. On Li Chenglong's own social media account, he couldn't tell which one was Zhuo Xiaojuo. It didn't look like him at all. Looking at Zhuo Xiaojuo, who was lost in thought at the moment, Li Chenglong's curiosity was aroused. He tiptoed over. Zhuo Xiaojuo was lost in his thoughts. He went back and forth on many things in Fenghai City. He went back and forth between the major families. He even remembered the contact information of the high school teachers that he kept. Occasionally, he would think of Uncle Nan, Uncle Wu, and even the influence of the military at Sun Moon Pass. All kinds of things, all kinds of troubles, were churning in his heart. He only felt that there seemed to be a line in the mess, but it was vague and difficult to grasp. Zhuo Xiaojuo was keenly aware that there was a dark hand covering everything and suppressing everything. And on this huge dark hand, there were small branches and branches emerging. Every one of them was a huge conspiracy. In Zhuo Xiaoduo's mind, the whole Fenghai City was almost connected by a conspiracy. It's really a headache. But even if it was a headache, he couldn't not think about it. After all, it was the key to his life. He had to think, reason, and find out. Zhuo Xiaojuo didn't want to die. Even if there was a desperate situation in front of him, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, Zhuo Xiaojuo would work 1,000,000 times harder to fight for it. Although the Gao family in Shangjing hadn't made a move yet, Zhuo Xiaojuo knew very well that once they made a move, it would be a thunderbolt. His so-called backup and trump cards might not be able to block it. Maybe it would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, unable to withstand a single blow. Where is the hope? If I were the Gao family in Shangjing, how would they deal with me? Li Chenglong tiptoed into Zhuo Xiaoduo's study. A computer was placed on the table with a black screen. But this obviously wasn't a problem for Li Chenglong. After a simple operation, the screen lit up. It was a page of the Sword King's high school martial arts career. It seemed that Zhuo still cared about these things. Li Chenglong snickered in his heart. A certain someone might talk nonchalantly every day, but his actions were actually quite honest. Zhuo Xiaoduo's account was in the login state. When he saw the name, Li Chenglong immediately felt as if he was struck by lightning. This name really showed off its high and mighty capabilities. At the same time, it made people unable to understand it and unable to make heads or tails of it. Jingjing Cat. Li Chenglong stared at it for a long time, but he couldn't figure out the meaning of this name. Jingjing Cat. What kind of word was this? And Jingjing Cat. This name, no matter how you looked at it, was a girl's name, okay? How could it be the online name of our mighty and domineering Zhuo? He looked at a few social media accounts on different platforms. They all had the same name. Jingjing Cat. Li Chenglong became more and more confused. This online name was really weird. Furthermore, what the hell was this bastard's comment? Li Chenglong looked at the serial post-sect leader's high school martial arts life horizon and suddenly realized that the one who jumped up and down, cursed the most fiercely, and scolded the most fiercely was this Jingjing cat. She scolded the sect leader of the Iron God sect as worthless and raised the Sword King up high. What sect leader? Too ugly. Look at our Sword King, how handsome, how dashing. A fine young master in a chaotic world, a handsome young man. Did you notice? When the Sword King appeared, the sect leader was immediately overshadowed and dispirited. Mighty Sword King, look at me, I want to give birth to monkeys for you. My favorite Sword King. Ah, why did the sect leader, this little fatty, appear again? Cut. Mighty Sword King, unifying the martial arts world. The Sword King is domineering, who can compete with him? This Li Chenglong is really annoying, coming out to steal our Sword King's limelight. Kill him. Li Chenglong was dumbfounded, his two eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. Oh my god. Zhuo Xiaojuo, you're good, you're really good. It turns out that the one who scolded me the most was actually you, brat. He really didn't expect that Zhuo, who kept saying that trolls were the most detestable, that they wanted to unify the online discussion, put an end to trolls, and get rid of all trolls in one fell swoop, was actually a warrior among trolls on the internet. He was definitely a super big troll. Li Chenglong's worldview was completely shattered. After a long time, he quietly walked down the stairs with a broken heart. Zhuo Xiaojuo was still lying there, thinking about things. His two long legs were almost split apart, one leg on the coffee table beside the sofa, and the other leg on the top of the sofa's backrest. His body was twisted, his butt was in the middle of the sofa, and his head was tilted on the pillow. While thinking about things, he reached out one hand and grabbed the fruit that Zhuo Qiaoer and the others had just bought, one by one, and put it into his mouth. He unconsciously sucked, and the fresh and juicy fruit flesh entered his mouth. Then, with a puff, the grape skin was spat out, landing exactly in an open trash can 3 feet away. He grumbled to reject it, sighed softly in happiness, and swallowed it. Then, his hand reached out like a long-armed ape, and grabbed another grape. A gust of spiritual energy rushed out, washing the crystal grape clean, and threw it into his mouth. Then, puff, he spat out the skin. That comfortable feeling. Those who knew would think that this bastard was so comfortable that he was about to ascend to heaven. He reached out again. And the grapes were gone. While he was at it, he took out a bag of melon seeds, tore open the packaging, and grabbed a handful. Then, the melon seed skins began to spit out from Zhuo Xiaojuo's mouth like a thresher. Flowers scattered from the heavens. On the sofa, on the chair, on the floor, on Li Chenglong's computer, some even drifted into Li Chenglong's bedroom. Zhuo Xiaojuo. Li Chenglong shouted sternly, what the fuck are you spitting out? Can't you be a little more decent? Zhuo Xiaojuo weakly rolled his eyes and put on a bitter face. Swollen, the Gao family in Shangjing has made it clear that they want to deal with me. I'm a dying man, and you can't even let me have some fun. Li Chenglong was furious. But you've been scolding me on the internet for a long time, what are you going to say? Crystal cat. When he heard this, Zhuo Xiaojuo jumped up from the sofa like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and his eyes widened. Li Chenglong, how dare you invade my privacy? You're courting death. Li Chenglong snorted. How is this privacy? Don't change the subject. You're scolding me on the internet, don't you think you should give me an explanation? Zhuo Xiaojuo stomped his feet and yelled, Li Chenglong, my sincerity to you is in vain. I helped you cultivate, I helped you neutralize the yin energy in your body, I worked so hard for you, I helped you break through, I taught you martial arts, I gave you a space ring, I gave you countless top-grade astral souls jade for you to cultivate. I gave you an astronomical amount of wealth, and you're only holding on to Xiao's words on the internet. Are you still human? What's wrong with scolding you? You still owe me money that others can't earn in 100 lifetimes. Have I ever asked you for it? Have I ever mentioned it? You only see me scolding you. What else can you see? Can't you think of something useful in this pitiful brain of yours? Your brother, your big brother, your big brother, your big brother, your big brother who is as heavy as a mountain and as affectionate as the sea to you, is facing a life and death crisis. And you only see him scolding you. Li Chenglong, tell me, are you worthy of me? Tell me, are you still human? Chapter 472. Li Chenglong was stunned by the scolding. But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make sense. Zhuo has done so much for me. I still owe Zhuo so much. How can I scold him? I don't intend to pay him back. But I still owe him. Thinking of this, a sense of guilt arose spontaneously. He suddenly felt short of breath and swallowed his saliva awkwardly. With a face full of shame, he said, Zhuo, don't be angry. He was so frightened that he began to use honorifics. Zhuo Xiaoduo's face was full of emotions. His voice became more and more emotional. How can I not be angry? If it were you, wouldn't you be angry? Think about it yourself. Are you still human? How dare you peek at my privacy? Zhuo Xiaoduo sneered. After saying this, he stomped on the floor and went upstairs. Hurry up and leave. I can't wait for him to react. If he left, this matter would be settled. If he reacted and quarreled, it would be over again. The more Li Chenglong thought about it, the more terrified and ashamed he felt. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he had let Zhuo down. Sigh. He almost wanted to slap himself a few times. After sitting for a long time and criticizing himself for a long time, he suddenly remembered. Hey! This doesn't seem right. This guy is using this to trick me. Li Chenglong wanted to cry but had no tears. How could I be led into a ditch by him? But I can't scold him anymore. You, Zhuo Xiaoduo, actually have the face to say that you have never asked me for a debt. Who is the one who asks me for a debt with a black face whenever you need me to do something? You can't wait for me to clean up your mess every day. As long as I'm not willing, you start to ask me for a debt with a black face. You actually have the face to say, have I ever asked you for a debt? You actually said, are you still human? What the hell? Boss Zhuo's ability to occupy the moral high ground is something I can only look up to. You are the one who is not human. Since his life was at stake, Zhuo Xiaoduo naturally went to Yi Changqing's house that night to inform him of his situation. The Gao family of Shongjing. Yi Changqing said indifferently, don't bother. Do what you need to do. As for the rest, we will take care of it. You have contributed a lot to the Martial Hidden Dragon School, so the Martial Hidden Dragon School will naturally protect you. Okay. Zhuo Xiaoduo was unusually obedient. On the other hand, Yi Changqing's eyes flickered as a faint murderous intent gradually brewed. How did he figure out Zhuo Xiaoduo's involvement so quickly? These guys are pretty smart. Well, it should be said that in terms of scheming and setting up traps, these guys were indeed skilled. As for his own Hidden Dragon High School students, they really didn't have the brains to play tricks and schemes. After sitting for a while, Zhuo Xiaoduo said goodbye. However, before he left, he still said something uncomfortably. Principal, personally, I still don't agree with what you said the other day. I feel that what you are doing is undoubtedly waiting for death. It is really too pedantic. There is only hope when people are alive. Without your presence, will the Martial Hidden Dragon School still be the Martial Hidden Dragon School of the past? Zhuo Xiaoduo mustered up his courage and said, can't we use our methods against evil people? I really don't understand this. Yi Changqing looked at Zhuo Xiaoduo with a warm gaze. He smiled amusedly and said, your teacher when already understands it. Why are you the one who doesn't understand it? This is the choice of a person's three views. It has nothing to do with anything else. Zhuo Xiaoduo, as the principal of the Martial Hidden Dragon School, I can't use those despicable, shameless, and unscrupulous methods no matter what. This is because the entire school's teaching staff was brought up by me. Everyone's eyes are on me and they look at me as an example. Everyone also knows that these people came from unscrupulous backgrounds and their motives are impure. They all have their own ambitions. Everyone feels aggrieved and depressed. This is the current situation. No one can erase it. However, if I use the same despicable means, such as framing, or even assassination, to get rid of these people, I can foresee that the entire school and all the teaching staff will feel refreshed and relieved, as if they have vented their anger. At least that's what you think, right? Everyone will feel refreshed and feel that good will be rewarded with good and evil will be repaid with evil, right? This will be a refreshing way to vent their anger. Blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth, and a straight answer for grievances. Right. Zhuo Xiaojuo nodded. That's right. Repaying kindness with kindness and repaying grievances with justice is exactly what a gentleman should do. Students feel that there's nothing wrong with it. It's only right. However, in that way, all the teachers will remember this example. It will be deeply ingrained in everyone's memories. In the future, when they and their students are faced with something that they can't deal with through normal means, they will often think, do, and teach in this direction. They will also talk about it with countless students and relish in it. Back then, there was something that made them feel aggrieved and depressed. Everyone knew about it, but there was nothing they could do. In the end, it was Principal Enchanting who decided to use conspiracy against conspiracy. He used extreme methods, blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. He defeated the other party, and then this and this and this. Enchanting smiled. After that, whenever a student uses such methods to achieve something and has some achievements, they will naturally urge 10 people to do the same. In the future, it will be 100, 1,000, 100,000. If this cycle continues, there will come a day when everyone will instinctively think that if there's something that can't be solved through normal means, so what if it's a little despicable and shameless? As long as the result is good, what does the process matter? When that time comes, what do you think the environment will be like? For some things, as long as there's a first time, there will be countless times. And when there's a first time, there will be countless times. And people's bottom line will be pushed back step by step. It's impossible to say how far it will go in the end. Now that they've come in with schemes and tricks, everyone will feel aggrieved and helpless. But in their hearts, they still look down on them and even hate them. The most important thing is that everyone clearly knows that what they're doing is wrong. It's despicable, shameless, and despicable. This is the concept of right and wrong. Moreover, there's still me, the principal, above them. They have to endure the humiliation and insist on doing things in an upright manner. Then, although everyone will feel aggrieved, their nature will still not change. But if I, the principal who is respected by the entire school, who is seen as a role model, have no choice but to do that in the end, then it's a bugle call. It's saying, to deal with despicable and shameless people, using despicable and shameless methods to deal with them is the right way to go about it. And this kind of thing, once you've tasted the sweetness, you won't be able to stop. In the future, when you encounter benefits or something you want, under circumstances where normal means don't work, you'll naturally choose this path after a mental struggle. It's still the process, still the result you want. Then in the long run, what kind of place will the environment of my Hidden Dragon High School become? What kind of people will be taught? Even I no longer have the right to comment on this kind of method. After all, I'm the one who used this method first. What qualifications do I have to say about others? As long as there's even the slightest possibility, I won't use this last extreme method. This kind of method of drinking poison to quench one's thirst may be stable for a while, but in the end, it will still turn Hidden Dragon High School into a place of filth. My one extreme action may affect the mentality of the students of Hidden Dragon High School for thousands of years. Enchanting laughed bitterly. Let me ask you, how would I dare to do it? That's why I'd rather continue to hold it in and not dare to cross the line. This is where I, as the principal, am most helpless, but it's also where I have to defend with all my might. Enchanting smiled and said, but there's one point. Not using the tricks of the ghost domain doesn't mean that I'll let them go. Those who should be dealt with, will still be dealt with. And Enchanting revealed a sly smile and said, even if I don't do it, don't tell me you can't do it. I've only said that as the principal, I definitely can't do this kind of thing. But I've never said that. The others can't do it, they're not allowed to do it. If when Xingtian did it and chased those people out, then, as the principal of Hidden Dragon High School, I'll severely punish Wen Xingtian. Because this kind of situation can't be ignored, and it should be prohibited. At that time, the whole school will have vented their anger, and at the same time, because I punished Wen Xingtian, the resentment will be directed at me again. But the result will still be to put an end to this kind of atmosphere, to that kind of possibility. At most, I, as the principal, will be the one who'll be blamed. When the bad guys are around, I'll be blamed for not doing anything. Chapter 473. In a place where Zhuo Xiaojuo could not see, Yi Chongqing was looking out of the window. His eyes flashed with memories, hardships, and decisiveness, but in the end, after the clouds flashed in his eyes, they returned to their original calm, restrained, and steady state. He was unusually steady. Yi Chongqing's expression was bleak. He really wanted to say something. Do you know how much pain I had to endure to temper my temper to this point? How much pressure did I have to endure? How many years of incomprehension did I have to endure? But I can only do this because I'm the principal. Zhuo Xiaojuo deeply felt that he was young and immature. I'm still too inexperienced. As Principal Yi said, my experience is far from enough. I still need to sharpen myself. But it's a little too passive to blindly take a beating and simply deal with their moves, Zhuo Xiaojuo said. Yi Chongqing chuckled and said meaningfully, of course there's a reason. He did not say anything else. Zhuo Xiaojuo was deep in thought. Next, the internet continued to surge. The Sword King and sect leaders Gao Wu Shengya were still updated in an unusually firm manner. The Gao family, Wu family, and even the Li family appeared by the Sword King's side more and more frequently. Slowly, everyone became accustomed to it. In addition to their daily battles, Zhuo Xiaojuo and the others began to use their credits to exchange for suitable martial arts techniques, mental cultivation methods, and insights from the school during this period of time, when Xingtian was once again in his busiest mode. The martial arts selection. The freshman martial arts selection was the most critical moment. After the first month of entering the school, the teachers, who had already understood all the little guys, began to lead their students to the martial arts selection. The direction of cultivation and the profession. This was a decisive step in life. The Hidden Dragon Martial School had been accumulating martial arts for thousands of years. They had collected countless martial arts from the four ranks of Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. Wen Xingtian would never choose the martial arts according to the highest rank. He would only choose the most suitable and compatible one. All the information he had collected before was to prepare for today's decision. Before choosing the martial arts, Wen Xingtian once again conducted a one-on-one test to confirm the current aptitude of the students, as well as the potential of the astral souls, to see if there were any new changes. The Heaven, Earth, Mystic, and Yellow-level martial arts were said to have a strict barrier, but it did not necessarily mean that they were Heaven-level martial arts. They were definitely awesome. All along, there were only suitable people and suitable martial arts. The majority of Heaven-grade cultivation techniques paid the most attention to talent and aptitude. If a person with an average aptitude was forced to practice a Heaven-grade cultivation technique that was incompatible, the only result would be the early death of the cultivator. The most direct manifestation of an incompatible Heaven-grade cultivation technique was the backlash of the cultivation technique. The meridians would be overloaded, and if one could not bear it, one's cultivation would be scattered and one's spirit would vanish, dying prematurely. For example, some people said that they were born with superhuman strength, but their body coordination was not enough. If he were to cultivate a Heaven-level martial art that focused on physical fitness, he would definitely be able to achieve half the results with twice the effort. If that was the case, it would be better to cultivate a Xianhuang-level method of tempering one's strength. That way, one would be able to unleash one's strength to the greatest extent, and would be able to unleash even more power. The teachers of the Hidden Dragon High Martial Arts Academy racked their brains to come up with a choice for these cultivation techniques. There were 36 people in the first class. Other than Zhuo Xiaojuo, who did not need to choose a major cultivation technique, and Xiong Chong, Xiong Bing, and a few others, who had their own family's cultivation techniques that were compatible with them, the others were using this opportunity to choose a major cultivation direction. Furthermore, they had to take into account their own physical fitness, the differences between the 5 elements, and the various advantages and disadvantages to make their choice. Which ones were suitable for soft water, which ones were suitable for fierce fire, or even thick earth, and so on. This was the job of the teachers. If a student made a wrong choice at this crucial moment, they would never have the chance to start over again in their lifetime. And this time, the time required to decide on a major cultivation technique would last for at least 3 days. During this period, no matter if it was day or night, no matter how long it lasted, the Hidden Dragon High School students all called it the Night of Ecstasy, because during this period of time, it was often accompanied by an indescribable sadness. It was even sadder than the day of graduation. This period of time was also called the Night of Life's Choice. Everyone's future was being shaped in just a few short days. When Xingtian had all the students of the first class line up outside the martial arts library, he then brought people in to choose a suitable cultivation technique. Every time, he would only bring one person in. After each person entered, Wen Xingtian would have to confirm at least 70 or 80 times. After he had made his choice, he would move on to the next one. Every student who had chosen a cultivation technique would respectfully bow to Wen Xingtian. This was a true life guide. Originally, the students of the other classes also kowtowed, but when Xingtian felt that kowtowing was a waste of time, he directly bowed and hurriedly left. Even so, when the 30 people in the class had all finished choosing, it was still afternoon. The sky was almost dark. When Xingtian still did not stop and brought the students to choose a major cultivation direction for weapons. According to the major cultivation technique that each person had chosen, the weapon type and the moves that they chose were also very different. Although they were all swords, some people needed a heavy sword to bring out the characteristics of their cultivation technique. Some people needed a broadsword. Some people needed a sword that was half a foot longer than the standard long sword. Some people needed a sword that was 3 inches shorter. Some people needed a narrow sword. Some people needed a soft sword. Some people needed a light sword. There were all kinds of differences. And for all of these, there were still more than 100 types of sword techniques that could be matched with each type. From these 100 types of sword techniques, one had to choose the most suitable path for this student. Suitable height, weight, strength, temperament, arm length, cultivation technique, sword body, etc. Everything had to be matched as perfectly as possible, only then could it bring out the greatest effect. There were also other weapons, all of which had the same meaning. When everyone had finished choosing, it was already 9 o'clock in the morning of the second day. When Xingtian, who had been busy for a day and a night, still did not rest. He made a judgment according to the students' personalities, cultivation techniques, cultivation, aptitudes, roots, and other aspects to find the most suitable career direction for the students. Although the swordsman who came and went alone and the warrior swordsman who could cooperate with others, although they were both mainly using the sword, there was almost an essential difference in their bones. There was also a great difference between the proud and aloof swordsman and the warrior swordsman. Some people were born to cooperate with others, but some people were absolutely not suitable to attack in groups. They could only be alone. This consideration still had to be perfected before special training could be carried out. When Xingtian divided the 36 people in the first class into 27 groups, the degree of detail in the division made even Li Chenglong, who boasted that he was as meticulous as hair, smack his tongue. Among these 27 groups, many of them only had one person in each group. In the end, when Xingtian gave a confirmation, all the rare professions were taken away by their own people. The professional teachers of each profession took the students of their respective professions away. Unified management and unified coaching. This involved a lot of the secrets of the professions, which could not be exposed. From now on, these people would not gather together for lessons and battles. Instead, under the urging of the professional teachers, They would cultivate their own specialties on their own. This was the so-called specialization in a profession. Basically, except for the professions with a large number of people, such as warriors, scouts, and commanders, which could be exposed, most of the unorthodox professions were very confidential and had never been known by outsiders. The basic requirement given by the teachers of each profession was that they were not allowed to tell anyone what their major was until graduation. Of course, very few people could do this. It could even be said that no one could do it at all. Because these people were not separated from the order of the first class. They were just not together during training, but they were still together during the daily learning of martial arts theory and knowledge. In other words, they were just separated to carry out the blocking training of each profession. They were not separated from the first class. And for the members of the same class, it was easy to reveal the trend of their own studies through daily communication, friendship, and learning from each other. However, after graduation, a considerable number of students directly disappeared. They would carry out the secret missions of their profession and disappear into the sea of people from then on. Even if they were classmates now, in the future, these students of secret professions might be able to see you, but you would definitely not be able to see them. It was equivalent to disappearing from your daily life forever. The teaching philosophy of Hidden Dragon High School was to put war as the first and limited, and the main purpose was to provide talents for the war. It had always been like this. This was the original intention, and it was unwavering. For example, if a secret professions became a shadow and became the personal bodyguard of an important person, then this person would basically not be able to appear in a normal life in this lifetime. Unless he retired, or failed a mission, or died. After this night of ecstasy, even when Xingtian only checked the progress of these people once every half a month. For the rest of the time, he did not care about them anymore. When they reached the 4th year, the special professions would completely disappear, along with their files in Hidden Dragon High School. They would turn into code names and disappear from the continent of Astral Souls, or disappear from the continent of Umno Alliance, or disappear from the continent of Dao League. One by one, the teachers in black appeared like ghosts. At this time, the 6 male students and 1 female student who had been selected began to report to their respective professional teachers. This kind of special profession choice was also two-way. You could refuse to become such a special profession, but after refusing, the person involved would directly change to a normal warrior. But in the first class, at this moment, no one refused to become a special profession. After reporting, you only have one chance to contact your respective families. When Xingtian said, after this contact, you still have one chance to regret. Too much sadness flashed in his eyes. Because these special professions, no matter whether they lived or died, to their families, it was no different from death. There would be no news, no contact, no association. Chapter 474. The 7 of them nodded slowly, but none of them chose to leave. Just like what the principal often said, some jobs must be done by someone. The 7 of them stood in a row and bowed solemnly to Wen Xingtian. Wen Xingtian closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time. The 7 of them bowed respectfully to the ground. The moment they straightened their bodies, they walked towards their respective teachers without looking back. During these 4 years in the Hidden Dragon High School, you must cherish each other and get familiar with each other. When Xingtian closed his eyes and said, because, if they encounter danger, looking at the entire continent, the only ones who can save them and find them are the 29 of you. Only you have a very small chance of recognizing them and helping them solve a crisis. And the prerequisite for this chance is that you must be as familiar with each other as your own life. Cherish. Only then can you recognize them and find them in time. This is the value and meaning of the existence of this class. Among the 7 of them, there was Pai Yibao, who was known for his eccentricity. At this moment, Pai Yibao's face was filled with calmness. There was no trace of his usual cheeky smile, but an unexpected solemnity. After contacting your families, if you still don't change your mind, in the next 4 years, Each of you will have 100 days of leave compared to the other students to reunite with your family. But leave doesn't mean that you will stop cultivating. You must understand this. Wen Xingtian said softly. The 7 of them were taken away. There were 29 people left in the first class. Among them, 8 of them had chosen relatively unorthodox weapons, and they were all taken away by their respective teachers. As for the remaining 21 people, the weapons they chose were the more common ones among the 18 types of weapons. These weapons were taught by their respective teachers who were in charge of sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. There was no need for them to cultivate in private. As the head teacher, Wen Xingtian's job from now on was to observe, correct, observe, and discover. He was also an expert swordsman, so he was also the head swordsmanship instructor for the entire year. As for the other weapons, even an expert like Wen Xingtian couldn't interfere with other people's teaching. It was still the same old saying that there were specializations in every field. A person who had been immersed in the saber all his life would have a much greater understanding of the way of the saber than others. The Hidden Dragon High Martial Arts Academy's level of meticulousness in this aspect of teaching was unbelievable. There were many weapons, and there were many students with average aptitude who were not particularly outstanding. In fact, as long as they entered the door, they would not be able to touch other weapons for the rest of their lives. Because his aptitude was only average, if he were to touch something else, it would disrupt his focus, and he would never have the chance to reach the peak again. Although cultivating one path for the rest of one's life would cut off all other possibilities, it was precisely because all other possibilities were cut off that there was a greater possibility of reaching an extremely high realm on that path. Throughout the entire process, all the students stood upright, and no one spoke a word. There was only silence as they walked in and out. 3 whole days passed. Everyone watched as their classmates walked past them and went to other specializations and fields. Everyone's heart seemed to be being torn apart again and again. Strictly speaking, the time that the students of Class 1 spent with each other wasn't very long. At most, it was only about a month or so, and it wasn't as if they were going to be separated by life and death. It seemed that everyone's attitude was a little too much, and it wasn't to this extent. However, in this 1 month or so of time together, they had experienced battles, confrontations, and even life and death situations. The feelings that were born were not something that could be described by ordinary friendship. And from today onwards, everyone's life would take a completely different direction. After today, the 36 people would be divided into 36 different directions and 36 different trajectories. From today onwards, the 36 directions would be separated. Even if everyone's hearts were still in the same place, their goals would still be the same. But the path that they would take would already be different, very different. Of course, the sneak attacks on each other every night would still not stop. After going through Zhuo Xiaoduo's hellish day of stabbing, this bunch of people in Class 1, at least for now, were like hungry wolves that had seen blood. There was a hint of bloodlust. It was believed that when the characteristics of each profession were added, it would only be more cruel and bloody. After Class 1 finished choosing, they returned to the classroom. The remaining 21 people all stayed here and waited quietly. In front of the martial library, there were many first-year students after Class 1 standing quietly, waiting for their choice. During this period of time, countless senior students, no matter how arrogant, lawless, or arrogant they usually were, had become. At this moment, they were all silent, as if they were seeing themselves yesterday. Looking back at their own class, those students who were becoming more and more silent due to their special professions, trying harder to make themselves invisible. Everyone couldn't help but feel uncomfortable in their hearts. When they had lowered themselves to the point where they were completely invisible. When they graduated, it was time to embark on their journey. When we were in our first year, we were still trying hard to remember them. But after these few years, the impression that they gave us became more and more blurred, almost to the point where we had almost forgotten them. They were clearly classmates who met face to face and communicated with each other every day, but they felt more like strangers. Of course, this was mainly because of their respective professions. They had to lower themselves to the point where they were invisible to be considered successful. Only by hiding from the people they were most familiar with could they successfully hide from others. But this kind of alienation and unfamiliarity made them feel uncomfortable. Because they would always bear more than they did. What does everyone think about special professions? At night, Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong sat on the sofa in the villa, recalling everything that had happened during the day. They felt inexplicably depressed and uncomfortable. I just don't understand. Why did that bastard Pai Yibao choose that kind of profession? Li Chenglong felt a little uncomfortable. No matter how I look at it, he's not suitable to be a spy. Zhuo Xiaojuo chuckled. That's where you're wrong. Pai Yibao is more suitable to be a spy than you and me. Li Chenglong thought for a long time and said dejectedly, you're right. There's no explanation here, everyone can express their opinions. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, but you, why didn't you choose to be a military advisor? Why did you choose to be a combat assistant instead? Li Chenglong rolled his eyes and said, is there a difference? Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed softly and said, there is a difference. If you choose to be a military advisor, there's a high chance that you'll be second only to one person and above tens of thousands. But if you're a combat assistant, even if you're not completely ordinary, at least you won't be able to reach that position. Li Chenglong rolled his eyes and said again, is there a difference? Zhuo Xiaojuo pondered for a long time before he finally smiled and said, indeed, there is no difference, I was just thinking too much. I will not explain it here, everyone can freely interpret it. He patted Li Chenglong's shoulder and said, swollen, how many times have you stepped on the thorny road? Li Chenglong sighed and said, recently, I've been absorbing the power of the top-grade jade of astral souls to increase my efficiency. The speed at which my dantian overflows is much faster than before, and the agitation of my vital qi has been suppressed quite smoothly. Now, it's already the 7th time, so I still have some energy left. But I estimate that I can suppress it at most 8 times. Any more and it'll be too much. He sighed softly and said, and this is the result of you helping me strip away the cold air every night. My inherent illness has instead become a resource that benefits me. Everything is predetermined, but now, all the cold air has been sucked away. My foundation has reached its limit. At most, there's one more time, and it'll be the end. I have to start preparing for the official breakthrough. Li Chenglong said it magnanimously, but in fact, he was still a little depressed. Because he wanted to break through 9 times. But looking at the current situation, it was obviously impossible. Just as he said, until now, it was already close to bursting, and it was already very difficult to suppress it. He estimated that by the last time, he might not be able to achieve perfection, and he would have to break through the embryonic breathing bottleneck. Every time he thought of this, Li Chenglong felt that all the pain he had suffered before was in vain. I can't even reach 9 times. I'm really useless. I wasted so many top-grade astral souls jade and the double practice with boss. Li Chenglong looked unusually disappointed. At this moment, a dull thud came from the door. When Xingtian walked in with a faint red mark on his forehead. He had been at the door for a while, but he didn't come in because he wanted to hear the evaluation of these 2 bitches. In the end, when he heard Li Chenglong's shameless statement, his worldview was completely shattered, and his moral integrity dropped to the ground. Even if we don't talk about Zhuo Xiaojuo, Li Chenglong suppressing it once was almost comparable to other geniuses suppressing their vital essence twice. You suppressed the foundation of such an exceptional genius a total of 8 times, which was even more powerful than others suppressing it 16 times. Since ancient times, the highest was only 9 times. What more do you want? Can I interpret your words as showing off, being pretentious, and being pretentious? Teacher Wen is here. The 2 bitches stood up and bowed respectfully. Greetings, teacher. When Xingtian said unhappily, at least I haven't been angered to death by the 2 of you. He turned to look at Zhuo Xiaojuo. How are you? Zhuo Xiaojuo blinked, showing a dejected look like Li Chenglong, and said faintly, Teacher Wen, can you help me, or help me think of a way to suppress it a few more times? I feel that I can only suppress it another 4 or 5 times at most, and that will be the end. Li Chenglong rolled his eyes. He naturally knew that Zhuo Xiaojuo suppressed it more than him, but he didn't know exactly how many times. He had never asked about this. This was a personal secret. He knew that if he asked, Zhuo Xiaojuo would definitely tell him, but Li Chenglong could resist asking. However, Wen Xingtian and Zhuo Xiaojuo didn't have such scruples, and Li Chenglong was definitely not an outsider. How many times have you suppressed it now? Wen Xingtian asked casually. 5 times, looking for monthly votes, looking for recommendation vote, looking for subscriptions. Chapter 475. Now, it should be 24 times. Zhuo Xiaojuo said with a bitter face, you know that every time I hit those vital essences at all costs. Every time I hit them until they couldn't move. I thought I could do it a few more times, but now, it's getting more and more difficult. I'm not afraid of pain, but 24 times. Too little. Li Chenglong stood up with tears streaming down his face. I can't listen to this anymore. I'm going to pee. Before he could finish his words, he had already slipped away like a wisp of smoke. Every time he heard Zhuo talk about such sensational things in such a depressed tone, he couldn't help but feel the urge to pee. It was really a blow to him. What Li Chenglong didn't know was that Wen Xingtian had the same idea at this moment. 24 times. He was really a monster. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times, and he said, Heaven and earth are not complete. You don't have to deliberately pursue perfection. You're fine now, very fine. Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed and said, how can it be fine? It's too bad. My sister, when she was advancing from embryonic breathing to elixir essence, she suppressed it 40 to 50 times. Alas. Teacher Wen, you don't know my bitterness. If it was 3 or 5 times, I'd accept it. But now, putting aside the realm, just the number of times, she's 20 times short, and there's still a surplus. I'm really unwilling. Wen Xingtian opened his mouth wide. After a long while, Wen Xingtian stretched out his hand and moved his chin. Then he said anxiously, Spiritual thought goddess? She suppressed it 40 to 50 times? Yes. She also suppressed it like you? Wen Xingtian felt that the sky was dark. Should be. Zhuo Xiaojuo nodded sadly, and said, Teacher Wen, do you know that my biggest wish in life is to beat her and beat her? Wen Xingtian calculated silently, shook his head gently, and said, if you calculate like this. According to the normal situation. If you maintain your current progress. Probably. There's not much hope. Suppressing someone in the embryonic breathing realm 40 to 50 times. This number really shocked Wen Xingtian. Instinctively, he thought, if embryonic breathing could be suppressed 40 to 50 times, then wouldn't it be more than 100 times during the innate realm? For a core nascent soul cultivator to advance from core nascent soul cultivator to core nascent soul cultivator, even if he did it more than 20 times. Not only was it unprecedented, it was likely that no one would be able to do it in the future. Doesn't this mean that the 9 Heavens Pavilion has picked up a treasure? Wen Xingtian was full of envy. Hearing Wen Xingtian's words, Zhuo Xiaojuo became more and more depressed. His face was full of dejection and dispiritedness. But how is this possible? The more Wen Xingtian thought about it, the more incredulous he felt. If it were anyone else, Wen Xingtian would probably beat them up. What bullshit was this? However, this was said by Zhuo Xiaojuo, and Zhuo Xiaojuo had actually suppressed him more than 20 times. Also, the 20 times that Zhuo Xiaojuo had suppressed him was equivalent to 100 or 200 times that other people had suppressed him more than 20 times. It was not an exaggeration to say that such a monster really existed in front of him. It really made Wen Xingtian suspicious and doubtful. He always felt that this kind of thing was unrealistic. The appearance of such a monster would shock the whole continent. Both siblings were like this at the same time? The possibility was not high, right? What kind of inheritance did this have? I'm here today for 3 things. Wen Xingtian said, first, I'll practice with you once. In the next period of time, I'll be busy with other students' matters. It'll be at least half a month, so I won't be able to take care of you. The second thing is, recently, many masters have secretly snuck into Fenghai City. Basically, they just showed up for a while and then disappeared immediately. I think it's related to you. You have to be more careful and be careful. And the third thing. Vice Principal Gao's family came to me because Vice Principal Gao was seriously injured this time. He hasn't woken up yet. Wen Xingtian said, although this incident seems to be a false accusation to us, it's still unclear whether it was the Gao family who framed him or someone else. If it was the Gao family who framed him, it really doesn't make sense to hurt him so badly. It's been 4 or 5 days, and he hasn't woken up from his coma. This could be a serious injury that damaged his foundation. But if it wasn't the Gao family who planned this incident, then why did Vice Principal Gao call out Xiong Quangren's name when he was attacked? And he did it intermittently several times, as if he was afraid that others couldn't hear him. The current situation. I don't know whether the Gao family is desperate or not. They bluntly said that they want you, Master Zhuo, to take a look. After discussing with the principal, I suggest that you go and take a look. It's not that you can't do it. Maybe you can gain something. But we still have to ask for your opinion first. What do you think? Wen Xingtian frowned. The whole story of this incident is strange and mysterious. It's really hard to understand. Zhuo Xiaojuo suddenly remembered that Jiao Qiao came to report to him. Could it be that his and Li Chenglong's inference was wrong? Then I'll go and take a look. Zhuo Xiaojuo took a deep breath and said, now that my fortune-telling ability is no longer a secret, there's no harm in standing in front of people and showing off my ability. Wen Xingtian nodded. Okay. I'll go too. Li Chenglong walked out of the toilet with his pants up. You. Wen Xingtian looked at Li Chenglong. Zhuo Xiaojuo had many trump cards, so Wen Xingtian was quite confident in him. It was appropriate for him to address his teacher's wife as Mrs. Gao. Little Zhuo. Mrs. Gao was very amiable. What a handsome child. Thank you for your hard work today. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Zhuo Xiaojuo chuckled with a carefree attitude. Under the gazes of everyone with different expressions, Zhuo Xiaojuo slowly entered the inner room. At this time, the entire inner room had been modified into a huge nourishment cabin. Countless spirit liquids constantly washed Vice Principal Gao's body. His body floated in the spirit liquids with his eyes closed, unconscious. On his forehead, there was a particularly eye-catching wound. At this moment, the wound was in a state of healing. However, every time the power of the spirit liquids caused the wound to heal halfway, a domineering force would suddenly surge out and expand the wound again, causing the healing process to repeat over and over again. There was no sign of improvement. Chapter 476. This is clearly the Overlord's force. Mrs. Gao looked at the wound and turned to look deeply at Yi Changqing. Principal Yi, with your cultivation level, you should be able to recognize it, right? This kind of Overlord's force that constantly accumulates to form destruction, other than the Xiong family. Who else can use it? Yi Changqing said indifferently, sister-in-law, please be careful with your words. This kind of force can only be said to have the same effect as the Overlord's force. What's more, there are really too many people who can use this kind of force. He looked at Mrs. Gao and said indifferently, the Dongfang family, the Wu family, the Nan family, the Beigong family, the Shangguan family, the Gongsun family, the Imperial family, and the Yu family, and even your family, as long as they have some understanding of this kind of force, they can all use it. Mrs. Gao's face changed every time Yi Changqing said a name. Especially when she heard the last 3 names, the Imperial family, and the Yu family. Mrs. Gao's face immediately changed and she said somewhat pleadingly, Principal Yi, you don't have to say any more. Yi Changqing looked at her indifferently and then looked at everyone present. Everyone lowered their heads under his gaze. Actually, I don't understand. Xiong Quangren has already proven his innocence with facts. Why is your Gao family still clinging to the Overlord's force? What's the point of this? The facts have already proven that this matter has nothing to do with the Seong family. But your Gao clan just won't let it go. You keep talking about the tyrannical strength and tyrannical strength. Let me give you a piece of advice. Instead of focusing on the Seong clan, why don't you focus on those clans I just mentioned and investigate them one by one? Yi Changqing said indifferently, maybe you can really find the murderer. Who knows? Mrs. Gao's face became even paler. A young man from the Gao family couldn't help but feel indignant and said, we'll definitely investigate. Since they're all suspects, we'll investigate them one by one. Don't tell me my grandfather is innocent. Shut up. Mrs. Gao shouted. Her voice and tone were extremely strict and even trembling a little. She turned to look at Yi Changqing and said in a low voice, Big brother Yi, this child doesn't know any better and is talking nonsense. Please don't take it to heart. Yi Changqing said indifferently, of course, I won't tell anyone. However, the upbringing of your Gao clan really needs to be strengthened. These words can only be said in Fenghai. If you still dare to say such words in Shangjing, it's hard to say when the Gao clan will cease to exist. There are many clans whose names cannot be mentioned, let alone investigated. Sister-in-law, you should understand the stakes involved. There's a saying in the ancient times. Prospering a family is like picking up soil with a needle, and squandering a family is like pushing sand with water. However, there's another saying. Destroying a family only requires one word. Yi Changqing flicked his sleeves and turned around, saying, Zhuo Xiaojuo, go up and take a look at Vice President Gao. It's a waste of time. There's no need to look. Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled and said, I've already seen it clearly. Oh. Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhuo Xiaojuo. The Gao clan has been schemed against this time. Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled bitterly and said, the same roots are frying each other, and the same family is fighting each other. Whether it's judging from physiognomy or qi observation technique, it's all the same. The key problem now should be the feng shui of the Gao clan in Fenghai. It's a trap set by someone. If we're not careful, the entire clan will be wiped out. Cough, cough, cough. Yi Changqing covered his mouth and coughed repeatedly. Zhuo Xiaojuo hurriedly shut his mouth. Madame Gao's brows furrowed as she thoughtfully swept her gaze around. There were almost 100 people in the room. There were too many people and too many people. Yi Changqing said, Sister-in-law, it's not good for too many people to know about this. Mrs. Gao nodded and said, eldest, second, and third, stay. The rest of you, leave. Another middle-aged man said unhappily, eldest mother, we're also father's sons. Why can't we listen? As soon as he opened his mouth, the other 10 or so sons immediately echoed his words. Mrs. Gao shouted sternly, all of you, leave. But still, no one moved. Second madam persuaded tactfully, eldest sister, we're all family. What's there that can't be said between family members? Besides, what that child said is terrifying. It's related to the life and death of our family. Let everyone listen and know the seriousness of this matter. It's better to brainstorm and deal with it. The other madams also chimed in. Yes, eldest sister. Everyone is concerned about our family. Eldest sister, no matter how bad we are, we can't ruin our family's affairs. Yes, eldest sister, why do you have to? Mrs. Gao closed her eyes, the veins on her forehead throbbing. After a long time, she said, second generation, stay. The rest of the younger generation, leave. I'm telling you, you can stay, but when I don't let you speak, if anyone dares to make a sound, get out immediately. TSK. Some people began to murmur in dissatisfaction. But from the grandsons onwards, they had all gone out. All the sons' wives had also gone out. The large room suddenly became much emptier. But there were still many people present. There were more than 10 wives and 23 sons. Even with Yi Changqing's composure, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. He looked up at the ceiling and sighed in his heart. Sigh, Vice Principal Gao must have had a hard time on a daily basis. No wonder he's so thin. If it were me. Principal Yi shuddered and didn't dare to think about it anymore. Zhuo Xiaojuo looked at these people and frowned. It is really brilliant. I don't know if Master Pang has ever thought that there was a hole in the beginning. Is it a hole you dug for yourself? The place where there was a mountain turned into a hole. It is the mountain that turned into a hole. Have you ever thought about it? There was a mountain in the place where there was no mountain. It is the Sun and Moon Mountain. It is located north of your so-called Imperial Dragon Pond and south of your house. What is the truth? Master Pang, you have your own thoughts. You should know this, right? Zhuo Xiaojuo said. What's more, the Sun and Moonstone is said to be able to suppress all evil. I don't know if you have ever thought that there was no hole in the beginning, but you dug a hole with your own hands. The Sun and Moonstone came from the Sun and Moon Gate, but here it is. This place has nothing to do with it, but you moved the gate in front of you and it became related. Adding a gate in front of your door, and it is the Sun and Moon Gate. You want to go out and break the gate first. Break the Sun and Moon Gate. What kind of behavior is this? Stabilizing the terrain? Who is really the one being suppressed? This is not suppression, but opposition. As for what you said, there are no more flaws. Haha. Maybe there are really no more flaws. In terms of silently trapping people, there are really no more flaws. Chapter 477. After listening to Zhuo Xiaoduo's sarcastic words, Master Pang's face suddenly turned pale. Even his eyes were filled with panic. He was also an expert in the way of qi observation. How could he not know that Zhuo Xiaojuo was telling the truth? Master Pang, don't tell me you don't know the origin of the Sun and Moon Stone? But isn't the pass you're building now the Sun and Moon Pass? Zhuo Xiaojuo said. The so-called Sun and Moonstone is a stone brought back from the Sun and Moon Pass. It's mixed with thousands of years of heroic qi and can indeed suppress all evil spirit. But you erected this pass in this position. I think the Sun and Moonstone you used as the foundation stone most likely has blood on it, right? Zhuo Xiaojuo asked in a low voice. Although he was probing, his tone was firm. Yes. There's blood. Master Pang was completely dejected at this moment. He was an expert in this field after all. He already knew that he had indeed made a mistake. Even if this mistake was not a common one, he still did not see it. But at that time, there was an authoritative figure guiding him. He firmly believed in it and acted according to the law. How could there be such a big mistake now? Zhuo Xiaojuo continued to ask, is the blood on the stone the blood of the people of the Umno Alliance? Or the blood of the martyrs of the astral souls? Master Pang's face became paler and paler. This, I don't know. Then who brought this Sun and Moon Stone back? Inside the pass? Outside the pass? Inside the pass? Or under the pass? Zhuo Xiaojuo said, don't tell me you don't even know this. I still don't know. Master Pang was dejected. This Sun and Moon Stone was bought by Principal Gao from that master. It's said that the master once made a spell on it. It's far better than the ordinary Sun and Moon Stone. Zhuo Xiaojuo laughed. The mountains become shallow valleys, and the water in front of the pass is shallow. Can this still be called the Imperial Dragon Pond? The Imperial Dragon Pond has long become the Hidden Dragon Pond. How dare this small and shallow pond with no water hide the dragon? Where should I put the Sun and Moon Stone in the most basic and routine operation? You don't need me to teach you this, do you? Master Pang's face turned even paler as he muttered, but at that time, the intention was to suppress the terrain of the Dragon Pond. Yes, even if I agree with you on this point, where are the people? Human. Master Pang's eyes were filled with panic as he said, back then, that great master said that if a heroic spirit exists, it will protect us for 1,000 years. Protect for 1,000 years. All right. Then I'll protect him for 1,000 years. But in terms of direction, who is he protecting? The one protecting. Master Pang said dejectedly. Is the Imperial Dragon Pond. This I don't understand. Protect the Imperial Dragon Pool, protect this pool from destruction for thousands of years. Then where is the suppression coming from? Zhuo Xiaojuo asked one question after another. Master Pang was sweating profusely. When was this pool dug? Back then. When I was buying property here. I first bought the garden and the land. Then, the main building was built and slowly took shape. 3 years after I moved in, it was about 17 years ago. Master Pang was now answering all the questions. Obviously, he was trying his best to make up for his mistakes. 17 years ago? That can't be right. Zhuo Xiaojuo snorted and said, in my opinion, the small spirit ginseng in front of the pass should have been deliberately left behind back then, right? It should have been discovered when they were digging that there were spirit herbs here. In order not to damage the earth veins here, they chose to leave it behind. It's the end of autumn now, and the leaves are red. Otherwise, I'm afraid something would have happened long ago. Mrs. Gao said sincerely, Master's eyes are as bright as torches. Everything is within your expectations. It's true. The incense has never stopped for 18 years. And it's really done by me. The other ladies were also shocked at this moment. They looked at Zhuo Xiaojuo in disbelief. How amazing. She clearly didn't see anything, but she was able to explain everything so clearly. He believed that such trivial family matters would not be recorded in any intelligence, but he was still able to see through everything. Even the information from 20 years ago was revealed one by one. Such methods were truly unfathomable. Master, may I ask why Madam Gao? Master Pang wasn't asking a question. He was asking humbly and sincerely. If Vice Principal Gao, who is in a high position, has been burning incense every day for 18 years as the head of the family, with such sincerity and effort, coupled with his status, filial piety, and the spirit of the ancestors, how could he only have 18 years of peace? Zhuo Xiaojuo said, doesn't this mean that Vice Principal Gao himself doesn't have such filial piety? On the other hand, only his wife can make up for it. The others can't do it. They don't have the qualifications, and they don't have the fate. Even if it's a son, it's still not enough. Mrs. Gao's eyes flashed with an indescribable light. She looked at Zhuo Xiaojuo with more respect and intimacy. If you still have doubts, you can drain the water of the hidden dragon pond. I'm sure that there must be something that Vice Principal Gao always carried with him under the pond, Zhuo Xiaojuo said lightly. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Mrs. Gao said, these years, whenever old Gao is in a bad mood, he will drink in the pavilion on the lake. When he's drunk, he will grab something and throw it down. I don't know how many there are. There must be more than 1 or 2 things in here. Then that's it. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, there's a problem with the feng shui of the house. The shadow of the ancestors can't cover it anymore. Of course, the wrong guidance at the beginning and the trap set up are the main reasons for today's change. Putting the sun and moon stone on the opposite side to form 2 opposite sides. Hee. Mrs. Gao. Zhuo Xiaojuo was about to say something, but he suddenly stopped and said, since Master Pang knows the problem, you must know what to do next. Master Pang, you've worked hard this time. Why don't you go back first? Master Pang was convinced and said, yes. I'll take my leave. I hope to have the opportunity to ask for your advice in the future. Zhuo Xiaojuo smiled and said, I value karma the most when I do things. You'd better wait until you get past the Gao family before you talk about the follow-up. Master Pang's heart trembled. He raised his head and saw Mrs. Gao's cold eyes. His heart skipped a beat and he said sadly, I'm not good enough and caused the main family to suffer such a loss. No matter what punishment there is, I'll accept it calmly. Zhuo Xiaojuo said lightly, however, the main reason for this matter is that Vice Principal Gao brought it upon himself. It's not right to put all the blame on you. Master Pang's eyes were full of gratitude. With Zhuo Xiaojuo's words, his life was most likely saved. Especially since the Gao family still needed him to change the feng shui pattern of the house. Killing him was no different from digging their own grave. Thinking of this, he bowed respectfully to Zhuo Xiaojuo again and then said to Mrs. Gao, Madam, I'll go to the backyard and wait for your orders. Then he walked out backwards. However, as he moved, his body was already a little hunched, no longer as straight as it was in the beginning. Mrs. Gao sighed and said, Master Zhuo, What do you think? Mrs. Gao, please don't call me that again. It's too much. Zhuo Xiaojuo said modestly, however, this matter really has nothing to do with Master Pang. With his own skills, he really can't set up such a clever feng shui pattern. Looking at the whole continent, there are only a few people who can see the danger of the so-called Imperial Dragon Pond's feng shui pattern. Basically, people who come to take a look will think that there's wind and water to gather wealth and fortune from all directions. It's a proper feng shui pattern. There's another thing. Master Pang mentioned several times just now that the key item, the sun and moonstone, was Vice Principal Gao's maze. This part is most likely true. In other words, the current situation is largely due to Vice Principal Gao's own actions. He brought disaster upon himself. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, as for Master Pang, I have another consideration. I just mentioned that I'm most concerned about karma. It's not convenient for me to personally change the feng shui pattern of the Gao family. The karma of this matter is too heavy. I know I can't afford to get involved. However, whoever started the trouble should end it. I need Master Pang's help to reverse it. Mrs. Gao, please don't do anything stupid because of a moment of recklessness. Mrs. Gao sighed disappointedly. Zhuo Xiaoduo's words were very clear and thorough. I can't afford to get involved in the karma of this matter. In fact, what he meant was, I won't help with this matter anymore. Pointing out the key to the maze is already the limit of my power. Chapter 478. Mrs. Gao thought of what her husband had done all these years. She looked at how Yi Changqing was protecting Zhuo Xiaojuo like he was protecting a chick. Mrs. Gao could only sigh. To be able to point out the crux of the matter, the entire Gao clan is already grateful. Mrs. Gao said solemnly. Then she turned around and bowed to Yi Changqing, saying, "Thank you for letting bygones be bygones." Yi Changqing nodded slowly. Master Zhuo, please give me some advice on how to break out of this situation. Mrs. Gao now regarded Zhuo Xiaojuo as her life-saving straw. The art of feng shui is as difficult as climbing the sky, but it's also as easy as flipping one's hand. To sum it up, it's just pulling one hair and affecting the whole body. You can advance and retreat as you wish. Zhuo Xiaojuo frowned and said, the established Imperial Dragon Pond turned into the hidden Dragon Pond due to fate. The pond is too small and its ability is too low. It can't hide the dragon, so it's counterattacked. You're in the hidden dragon pond, but you insist on hiding the dragon. You'll get twice the result with half the effort. If you don't have a big purpose, how can you do this? The hidden dragon pond is located in front of the sun and moon stone. The sun and moon stone comes from the sun and moon pass, which shows the dragon hiding outside the sun and moon pass. Zhuo Xiaojuo said lightly, speaking of which, your Gao family's roots are inside the sun and moon pass. Master's wife Gao, this is already a reversal of the universe, a reversal of heaven and earth. Mrs. Gao's face became more and more unpleasant. Some people have been plotting for a long time, but it was hard to get the cooperation of manpower and the protection of the Gao family. Now that the dynasty has fallen, the Gao family's fate is weakening. It's showing signs of a rapid decline. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, as the head of the family is seriously injured and unconscious, it's getting harder and harder to suppress the fate of the family with his own fate. The fate of the Gao family is falling apart, and it's hard to continue. It's faintly showing signs of blood. Master. In the future, there will be unexpected disasters in the family, and people will die one after another. Zhuo Xiaojuo said slowly, if you're talking about advice. It's not suitable for the Gao family to go out in the near future. Everything has to wait until Principal Gao wakes up. Wake up. Mrs. Gao's spirits were lifted. When will my husband wake up? Zhuo Xiaojuo said, Principal Gao's injuries this time are not light, but he is not in danger of dying. He will wake up in 7 days, or at most half a month. That's great. Everyone's face was filled with joy. As long as old Gao wakes up, our GAO family will immediately have a pillar of support. But this time, Vice Principal GAO. Zhuo Xiaojuo said softly, first, he was fooled, and then he was used. This time, the person who set the trap may have wanted to kill him. You should know that if Vice President GAO is really dead, the situation will be really out of control. Whether it is Vice President Xiong or not, it will be a big mess in Fenghai. Mrs. GAO listened attentively. Every word that Zhuo Xiaojuo said was reasonable and tugged at the heartstrings of the audience. Let me ask you, if we succeed in framing Vice President Xiong this time, what will be the final result? Who will benefit from it? Zhuo Xiaojuo said, if the framing fails and Vice President GAO is really dead, who will benefit from it? If Vice President GAO wakes up and continues to fight with Vice President Xiong with his sick body, who will benefit from it? If the GAO family and the Xiong family have a conflict outside, and the conflict becomes more and more intense, who will benefit from it? Zhuo Xiaojuo said word by word, these words should not be said by a student. Because Vice President Gao's position is really crooked. To put it bluntly, this matter is very likely to be a plan made by Vice President GAO and others. It's just that the other party is more skillful and beat Vice President GAO at his own game. They abandoned Vice President GAO to make the plan more thorough and the result more ideal. If Vice President GAO has recovered now, I won't even say these words. I won't even come here today. Because that will prove that he is committing treason. But if he doesn't wake up, he can still take a look. Zhuo Xiaojuo sighed softly, this is a serious matter. Xiaojuo doesn't dare to say too much. I hope Mrs. GAO can forgive me. Master, what are you talking about? Mrs. GAO said, today Brother Yi and Master Zhuo came here to give me real advice. Master Zhuo's words are sincere. I can't thank you enough. There's one more thing, about Vice President GAO waking up. I may see it, but the person who set the trap may see it. If he doesn't want to be exposed in front of others and be punished by Vice President GAO in the future, I'm afraid he will make more moves. Therefore, Vice President GAO will still be in danger during this period. Zhuo Xiaojuo said meaningfully, it's very important to take care of him during this period. Mrs. GAO felt a chill in her heart. Students were, can you please say it more clearly? Zhuo Xiaojuo chuckled, I can't. The startled light in Mrs. Gao's eyes flickered, and then she looked pensive. On the other side, Second Madam said, Master Zhuo, can you really be sure that my old GAO will wake up in 7 days to half a month? Zhuo Xiaojuo said somewhat playfully, according to the current treatment. As long as there are no accidents and he doesn't wake up when the time comes, everyone can treat what I said before as a lie. I'm only a student of Hidden Dragon High School. Second Madam, are you afraid that I'll run away? No matter what, I still have to stay in Fenghai for at least 4 years. Second Madam laughed dryly, you're joking. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion outside. It was so loud that it was unexpected. What happened? Mrs. GAO said sternly. Someone came in from outside in a panic. Madam, it's the 35th young master, 39th young master, and young master Pingyun. The 3 of them have been sent back. They've already passed. What? Hearing this news, the room immediately exploded. Quiet. Mrs. GAO shouted sternly, what are you panicking for? At this moment, the first thing that came to her mind was what Zhuo Xiaojuo had just said. The GAO family's fate is weakening, and it's showing signs of waning. As the head of the family is seriously injured and unconscious, it's getting harder and harder to use our own fate to suppress the family's fate. The GAO family's fate is falling apart, and it's difficult to continue. Looking at the faint signs of blood, the master. In the near future, the family will have an unexpected disaster, and there will be family members dying one after another. This sentence was still ringing in their ears, deafening them. In just a moment, the news of death had already spread, and 3 people had died at once. Find someone who understands the situation and explain the situation. Mrs. GAO shouted sternly, everyone else, don't act rashly, don't make a sound. Also, no one from the Gao family is allowed to leave the Gao family's old house. From now on, no one is allowed to leave the Gao family's house. Sinew. Mrs. Gao called her eldest son, you're in charge of monitoring. If anyone dares to leave without permission, punish them severely. It's better to let them go unpunished. No matter who it is, break their legs. Yes, mother. Gao Sinew agreed and walked out. A moment later, a middle-aged man covered in injuries came in. The three young masters were originally drinking at the First Glory Club, and it seemed that there were a few outsiders next door. Then, for some reason, a hostess went over there. Then, the three young masters were unhappy and they quarreled and fought, and the other party was especially ruthless. In just one move, the three young masters' heads were twisted off by the other party. The middle-aged man's face was pale, and blood flowed out of his mouth as he spoke. We were at the door. By the time we realized something was wrong and wanted to help, it was already too late. Mrs. Gao's body swayed, and she gritted her teeth. Do you know who the other party is? I don't know. There were only two of them, and after the incident, they beat all of us until we vomited blood and fell to the ground in one move. Then, the other party left, and by the time we chased after them, they were already long gone. Mrs. Gao fell silent. The monstrous anger that had suddenly erupted earlier was slowly being restrained. After a long while, she gritted her teeth. Serves them right. Their great-grandfather is still unconscious, and they were actually interested in going to the clubhouse to find a hostess in broad daylight. It's good that they died. First, gather the clubhouse's surveillance cameras, then wait for old Gao to wake up, then we'll talk about the follow-up. Put this matter aside for now. Also, immediately summon all the members of the Gao family who are outside and have them return as soon as possible. Even if there's an important matter, they are not allowed to stay outside. As long as they return, they are not allowed to leave the old mansion again. If she only believed 70 to 80% of Zhuo Xiaoduo's words earlier, then now, she believed his words to 120%. Master Zhuo. Mrs. Gao took a deep breath. Now that things have come to this, we're in a mess. I wonder if Master Zhuo can give us some pointers. The entire Gao family will be grateful to you. Zhuo Xiaoduo smiled bitterly. Mrs. Gao, I'm just a student, and my experience is shallow. Chapter 479. Half an hour later, Yi Changqing, Li Chenglong, and Zhuo Xiaoduo sat in the car on their way back. The three of them looked at each other in silence. When they arrived at Zhuo Xiaoduo's villa, the three of them got off the car and walked into the villa. Zhuo Xiaoduo chuckled. The Gao family is really generous. Li Chenglong scratched his head and said, I didn't do anything the whole time, but I still got 500 top-grade jade of astral souls. Haha. The Gao family had given them 3 gifts this time. Although Li Chenglong had only introduced himself during the whole process, this gift was still very valuable and he didn't forget to give it to him. I have a sword here. It can be said to be a divine weapon. I also have 1,000 pieces of high-grade star soul jades. There's also 1,000,000 star origin coins in cash. This is a high-grade ancient compass used to look at qi. Zhuo Xiaoduo said, looks like Mrs. Gao really put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of money. Yi Changqing smiled and said, she didn't just put in a lot of money. I also got 3 pieces of top-grade jade of astral souls. Principal, you're the one who got a huge windfall. That's 6 billion. Zhuo Xiaoduo's eyes lit up. It's not too much to ask for a share of 1 billion, right? Get lost. Yi Changqing scolded him. What do you need so much money for? Is it for food? You don't know, but I'm so poor that I don't even have food to eat. Zhuo Xiaoduo said. Yi Changqing reached out and knocked him on the head. The 3 of them had just sat down when Yi Changqing urged Li Chenglong to boil some tea. Then, he frowned and thought about what had happened that day. When the tea was ready, Principal Yi said, the 2 of you went to the Gao family today. What do you think of the Gao family? What do you think of this matter? Yi Changqing no longer dared to treat Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong as children. Most of the time, the sensitivity of these two people to the development of the situation was even better than his own. When Yi Changqing was discussing matters, he used a tone and attitude that was completely on equal footing and standing on equal footing. Zhuo, why don't you go first? Li Chenglong frowned and said, I don't know how to look at aura, so there are many things that I don't know. Let's wait for Boss Zhuo to finish, and then I'll follow Boss Zhuo's words and go deeper in that direction. Zhuo Xiaojuo took a deep breath and said, regarding this matter, I sincerely feel that Gao Zhiyun, Vice Principal Gao, is a blessed person. Blessed person? Yi Changqing and Li Chenglong were puzzled by Zhuo Xiaojuo's statement. Why did he bring this up? This matter. If we were to talk about it based on the laws of fortune, the Gao family would be destroyed. It would be a disaster that would end their bloodline. Unfortunately, Gao Zhiyun found himself a good wife. Zhuo Xiaojuo laughed bitterly and said, Gao Zhiyun's first wife should be a socialite from a big family, right? Or should I say, a direct descendant of a big family? Although he used a questioning tone, his tone was unusually firm. Yi Changqing thought for a while and said, it's said that Mrs. Gao is a direct descendant of the Shimen family. Back then, for some reason, the Shimen family kept giving birth to girls. They didn't have a son for decades. It was so extreme that even Marshal Shimen was anxious. And this Madame Gao was one of the daughters of the Shimen clan back then. However, although she was born of the first wife, she was far behind in the order of the first wife's birth. Moreover, there were hundreds of maidservants in the Shimen clan, so she was already annoyed and didn't care much about the other daughters in the clan. Yi Changqing chuckled and said, back then, the heavenly king of the right almost died of laughter. He even wrote a poem for Marshal Shimen to make it a joke. However, that was the truth. Cough cough. Yi Changqing felt that he had said something wrong. He said, you don't have to worry about this. He actually didn't dare to say anything. Zhuo Xiaojuo's heart itched unbearably as he asked, what is this minister talking about? Cough cough cough. Yi Changqing felt deeply regretful. What's wrong with me today? Why did I mention this when I was so careless? Cough cough cough. He coughed for a long time. When he saw that the two's eyes were shining with curiosity, he finally put on a straight face and said, let's talk business. Why are the two of you so curious? The principal's dignity was immediately raised. Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong were speechless. How can you blame us for this? Weren't you the one who brought it up first? Just now, you were so excited that we couldn't even stop you. But now, you're actually covering our heads with your saliva. Don't you know that it's a crime to keep us in suspense? You're an old man who doesn't respect himself. Let's end our banter. Tell us about your discovery. This is serious business. Yi Changqing urged Zhuo Xiaojuo. It was obvious that Principal Yi didn't want to continue the previous topic. For a moment, Zhuo Xiaojuo and Li Chenglong only felt that they were suffocated. The most annoying thing was to stop abruptly in the middle of a sentence. No matter how much you wanted to hear the follow-up, the other party wouldn't say a word. This was like some people writing novels. When they reached the most exciting part and the most suspenseful part, they would suddenly stop and there would be no more continuation. This kind of author was simply heartless. Fortunately, there was the most handsome head of the Feng family. He would never be like this. My discovery. Zhuo Xiaojuo coughed and began to organize his words. The reason why Vice Principal Gao is said to have been schemed against by someone and was heavily injured and had almost reached the end of his road, but his family was not ruined and he even had room to maneuver, is mainly because he took advantage of his wife's luck and had the luck of her in-laws to support him. Although I still don't understand why the lucky man who married the legitimate daughter of the Shimen family dared to have so many concubines. This in itself is a strange thing. Zhuo Xiaojuo stole a glance at Yi Changqing. Obviously, he wanted to hear the follow-up and found an excuse to start the topic. Well, there's another reason. Yi Changqing said, I'll tell you the details later. Now let's talk about business. Zhuo Xiaojuo rolled his eyes. Wasn't I talking about business? But this sentence was only said in his heart. What Vice Principal Gao encountered this time was a disaster of destruction. The right time, the right place, and the right people all came at the same time. How could he be spared? The most important one came from the fact that he inexplicably stood on the opposite side of the Sun-Moon Pass. Also, he did all kinds of things to shake the talent base. The lack of people and the right people was too bad. Secondly, he began to plan for the feng shui situation nearly 20 years ago, but he didn't know that he had already fallen into the trap of someone. The first opportunity was not the first opportunity, but the lost opportunity. His hometown became his weakness from the beginning. It was a loss of the right place. Then, he schemed against Vice Principal Xiong. He thought that he was the one who planned the game, but in fact, he was a pawn that was set to be abandoned. He suffered a heavy blow on his home ground. It was a loss of the right time. In the end, he was used by others. The most important thing was that his wife was virtuous, loyal, and filial. She shielded him from many disasters and left him with a chance to live, a chance to turn things around. The saying that good and evil will be repaid in the unseen world is really true. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, plus, our help pointed out the maze. Chapter 480. Zhuo Xiaojuo continued, and Yi Changqing continued to nod. But when it comes to the whole thing, it's obvious that Vice Principal Gao is in cahoots with someone else. He just doesn't know that he's just a pawn that can be discarded at any time. Zhuo Xiaojuo's tone was very certain. Yi Changqing pondered for a moment, then nodded silently. Li Chenglong wanted to say something, but stopped himself. The other party's goal is very clear. They want to use this opportunity to get rid of Vice Principal Xiong. That's why Vice Principal Gao directly called out Vice Principal Xiong's name during the battle. I even suspect that the original plan, which is the plan that Vice Principal Gao knew about, was for him to come forward and pin Vice Principal Xiong down after the battle. With the person involved as the witness, it's naturally more credible. If there's no solid evidence, Vice Principal Xiong won't be able to defend himself. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, this plan is quite ruthless. There's no room for negotiation at all. Li Chenglong interrupted, I will mark different possibilities for the time being. There are two behind-the-scenes manipulators involved here. One is a feng shui master 18 years ago, and the other is the person who set up the trap. If these two people are the same person, then this person is quite terrible. Zhuo Xiaojuo nodded and said, you're focusing on the main point, but it's not the main point right now. Let's talk about the Gao family's feng shui first. It's not just a problem, it's a big problem. Although I didn't say it too clearly or too seriously, I've already pointed it out. If we're serious about it, Vice Principal Gao's feng shui scheme back then is a crime of treason. It's a serious crime of betraying the astral souls. Of course, I think. Although Vice Principal Gao was involved in the scheme, he only thought he knew everything. In fact, he was kept in the dark. The serious injury this time already explains a lot of problems. Zhuo Xiaojuo said, and my other judgment is that Vice Principal Gao is obsessed with power, or the Gao family is obsessed with power. He keeps inserting people from his family into important positions. His main goal is to let the Gao family's influence in the astral souls and in Yanwu University rise steadily. There's a reason why he came to Hidden Dragon High School all these years. In Vice Principal Gao's opinion, as long as this matter succeeds, there will be a more important position waiting for him, or the Gao family will benefit greatly. Zhuo Xiaojuo casually drew a line on the table. It was an unconscious action, didn't mean anything. But Li Chenglong and Yi Changqing subconsciously looked. My judgment is based on the qi examination technique. The Gao family didn't betray the country. Or rather, the Gao family never had any thoughts of betraying the astral souls. Their feng shui scheme was set up by someone with intentions. It's really a very, very clever feng shui scheme. The clever part of this scheme is that even a very clever Qi examination scholar wouldn't be able to see anything wrong with it. The Gao family's luck has always been connected to the Yanwu Empire. They are rooted in one and have no other intentions. They can't be implicated in treason. Then, the feng shui scheme itself, to a certain extent, can really increase the Gao family's foundation. At the very least, the hindrance isn't obvious. It's very difficult. And this hindrance is, under the influence of this feng shui scheme, no matter what the Gao family does, the final result will be evil. It's all related to harming the interests of the astral souls. This is the most vicious part. This is actually related to the unseen growth and erosion of luck. Let's use an analogy. If Vice Principal Gao really sees a hidden spy, no matter how blinded by greed he is, it's ultimately just a desire for power. It has nothing to do with righteousness. Also, this feng shui situation is slowly eroding the protection of the Gao family's ancestral spirits, causing the combined fortune of the three to dwindle. Once all the fortune is depleted, it'll be the end of the Gao family. No matter how loyal they are and how much fortune they have, it's useless. It can't make up for the damage they've done to the heavenly Tao's fortune. Zhuo Xiaoduo said, "This is the situation now. The Gao family's fortune of Gao Zhiyun and his descendants has been depleted. Madame Gao's bloodline and fortune of the Shimen family will also be depleted in this matter. Next, it'll be up to Vice Principal Gao to make a choice. If he can repent and break the feng shui situation on his own, he may still have a chance to survive. However, if he's still stubborn and even delusional enough to take advantage of the current situation to reap benefits, then the Gao family will be uprooted when there's a little more disturbance. Because his fortune has run out, there's no room for change. At this time, if he can't do more good deeds to protect the country and its people and accumulate fortune, the day of his downfall will be an instant." Zhuo Xiaoduo coughed and said, "I'm referring to Vice Principal Gao. Gao Zhiyun's Gao family isn't the Gao family of Fenghai City, nor is it the Gao family of Shangjing City. You can't mix up these 2 points." Yi Changqing was baffled by what he heard. Although his cultivation was high and he had some understanding of the aura examination technique, his understanding was far from deep. At this moment, listening to Zhuo Xiaoduo's words, although it wasn't to the extent that he didn't understand much, at least not all of it. And this feeling was the most uncomfortable. It was like scratching an itch through one's boot. It was hard to enjoy. "You mean the fortune of the heavenly Tao is different?" Yi Changqing was dizzy. "Only the heavenly Tao is different. There's more than one heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was the heavenly Tao. Why did it seem like there were 2 heavenly Taos? Of course there's more than one. In fact, there may be several." Zhuo Xiaoduo was puzzled. How can they be the same? How can they be different? Li Chenglong was also puzzled. Of course they're different. Zhuo Xiaoduo was speechless. "Our continent is the continent of astral souls, right? Then 8 pieces were cut out, right?" "Yes. But 2 pieces came back later, right?" "Yes. The others haven't come back yet, right?" "Yes. Then for example, this continent was originally a big earthworm." Zhuo Xiaoduo held a pen this time and drew a big earthworm on the white paper. This earthworm was severely injured for some reason and broke into 9 pieces. 8 of them split off, and after going through all kinds of struggles, each of them survived and became independent individuals. That is to say, they have their own destinies and destinies. Do you understand what I mean? The other piece of the 8 pieces is the main consciousness of the original earthworm. It's the continent of astral souls. Although its vitality was greatly damaged because of the departure of the 8 pieces, it's constantly healing its wounds and slowly recovering into a complete earthworm. On the other hand, the 8 pieces of the earthworm that were previously split out are constantly struggling to survive. After a long period of tempering, they finally survived and grew into complete earthworms. And at some point, The two big earthworms of the Umno Alliance and the Tao League came back and reunited with the earthworm of the continent of astral souls. But do you think that these two earthworms and the earthworm of the continent of astral souls are the same? Zhuo Xiaojuo asked. Yi Changqing and Li Chenglong blinked and imagined this scene. Then they came to a conclusion. It's not the same. What we can be sure of is that these are three individual earthworms with their own thoughts, right? Zhuo Xiaojuo asked. That's right. So, isn't it obvious? 3 continents and 3 heavenly axes. What's so hard to understand? Zhuo Xiaojuo spread his hands. He really felt that this was a very simple theory. Why couldn't they understand it? Do you understand now? Zhuo Xiaojuo said. That's why there's a life and death war between the 3 continents now. Because the 3 heavenly axes are devouring each other. They all want to devour each other to strengthen themselves. As long as they succeed in devouring each other, they can take over each other's territory. It's that simple. And the earthworms have completely become different parts. If they want to reconnect to their original bodies, they have to be strong. Secondly, they have to fight each other until their flesh and blood are flying everywhere. Only then can they reconnect to their wounds and become one and complete the devouring process. Zhuo Xiaojuo explained seriously. In the end, this is the source of the endless war between the 3 continents and the unresolvable fighting spirit. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.